Thea in the DC Universe. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 51, Not a Pleasant Meeting. The group parked the flying vehicle in the open space on campus. The police officer acting as makeshift pilot fondled the controls, looking as if he wished he could live on board, ready for strategic maneuvers at any moment. However, he had to obey the commissioner's orders and, looking back every few steps, followed the main force. Meanwhile, Thea and Felicity swiftly hopped off their skateboards. Just as she was about to ask where Catwoman's other two teammates were, "Dad, you're finally back. Are you okay?" A stylish red-haired girl hugged Commissioner Gordon's neck, refusing to let go. Behind her followed a thin, black-haired young man. "I'm fine, Barbara." The old commissioner seemed a little unaccustomed to public embracing, and after a brief embrace, they released their hands. It seemed the girl was Batgirl, and the man was Nightwing, the future Robin. Thea didn't go up to greet them. Firstly, there was no need, and secondly, she was just reinforcements and didn't want to overshadow the main force. They were the ones who were the main force. Everyone couldn't crowd at the door to talk, so Commissioner Gordon asked everyone to go inside. Everyone was very quiet along the way, and only Barbara could be heard asking questions like, "Has Batman been found, and has the state government sent troops?" Commissioner Gordon interrupted her and introduced Thea and the others, but she just nodded lightly and continued talking to her father. "Sure enough, these city people are a little sick. Why are you so arrogant? You should beg me for help." Thea observed along the way and found that this woman was really simple. She only talked to her father and Robin next to her, and didn't ask a single question about the police officers who had been through life and death with her father. It's unknown what her IQ is, but her EQ is obviously not high. No wonder she was severely injured and paralyzed by the Joker, and she was in a wheelchair for 3 years before she repented. I remembered that after she was injured, she had received instruction from Richard Long, learning the long-lost skills of the Linghu warrior, the ultimate in fighting while sitting. She'd earned her fame as the Oracle from her wheelchair, becoming one with the wheelchair. Just imagining that scene gave me a chill. I'd definitely come and see it for myself. As a noble person, I certainly wasn't here to mock her. I'd definitely come with the intention of learning from her. Well, that was it. As they walked, they suddenly realized the group's numbers seemed off. Huh? Where's Catwoman? Thea looked over and saw Catwoman walking silently at the back of the group, with an inexplicable air about her. What did that mean? Were the two women at odds? Actually, she was right. Barbara, always so arrogant, had always looked down on Catwoman's thieving ways, believing them to be a desecration of the so-called righteous cause. Plus, Robin was so obedient to her, always accepting her every word. It seemed Catwoman might have gone out to get reinforcements, perhaps out of sight, out of mind. If it weren't for her quest to retrieve Batman, she'd have run away long ago with her old personality. I don't give a damn whether Gotham survives or not. Hey, do you have a place to change clothes I can borrow? Thea asked softly, pausing for a moment as Catwoman approached. This outfit was difficult to put on, and even more difficult to take off. She envied the Flash's lightning-fast speed. "Come with me," they said, greeting the larger group. Catwoman led Thea to the side. "Let's have a meeting in the conference room later," Commissioner Gordon said quickly. Catwoman waved from a distance, understanding. After changing into a light outfit, Thea returned to her harmless self and followed Catwoman to the door of a conference room. As they walked, they noticed a large number of civilians lying densely packed inside the school building. Some were in suits and ties, others in t-shirts and shorts. But they all shared a common trait, a lack of energy. Almost everyone was covered in blood, and many were bandaged. Entering the conference room, everyone made formal introductions, a task only Catwoman, familiar with both parties, could perform. "This is Thea Quinn, codenamed Red Arrow, and this is Felicity Smoke, a computer expert. These two are my teammates, Barbara Gordon, Batgirl, and Dick Gleason, Robin." Now that the formal introductions had been made, Barbara Gordon could no longer ignore Thea as she had previously, rambling on about things like, "I've heard so much about you, and how's my father, how's my mother?" Thea thought, "My nominal father has perished at sea, and you're still asking how he's doing. This is pure disregard, or perhaps a complete lack of self-worth, just a casual, Perfunctory response. After these pleasantries, a strange silence descended on the small conference room. Aside from the Star City duo, the others stared at each other, seemingly unwilling to speak. Even Barbara, who had previously seemed to be a chatterbox, had fallen silent. The atmosphere was strange. Why were they all so quiet? Could it be that they all possessed telepathic abilities similar to Professor X? But that was obviously impossible. If they had the ability, they could have killed Bane in a split second, and she wouldn't have had to travel so far. He glanced at Felicity calmly, then shook his head, signaling for them to just wait and see. Barbara, a thought suddenly dawning on her, suddenly summoned her courage and passionately declared, "I see you guys got a helicopter. That's great. We should fly over and raid Bane. Killing Bane will save Gotham." She was hesitant at first, but her joy grew as she spoke, as if Bane were a watermelon lying on the ground, waiting for her to pick it. Thea didn't quite understand her inner thoughts and refrained from pointing out that the helicopter was theirs. She rested her chin on her right hand, waiting to see what she could say. "What do you guys think?" Barbara said, feeling a little uneasy when no one responded. "Okay, great idea." Robin and her were deeply in love, and he supported his girlfriend's every word. Catwoman neither agreed nor disagreed, and Commissioner Gordon looked frustrated. Usually, Batman, the man of understanding, would figure things out, leaving the rest of the team to execute. But now, that man of understanding had been shunted off to some unknown corner, leaving the rest of the team without a voice to make decisions. He tried to give orders, but they wouldn't listen. Even his own daughter was stubborn as a cow, and he never had much say in the team. Just as he was about to speak in agreement, Thea finally saw their problem, their lack of initiative, or, to put it bluntly, their lack of brains. They usually relied on Batman's leg to defeat a few small bosses and thought they were invincible. Every single person in this room was an ordinary person. Not a single enhancer or psychic. And this team was ready to go all out to take on Bane? Do you understand his strength? They were charging in with no clue what was happening. They really didn't know how to spell death. I had to seize the initiative, otherwise these guys would lead the team into a ditch. As long as Bane couldn't fly, I could escape at full speed, but Felicity couldn't escape. She couldn't even do a few pull-ups, worse than an average person. I should have never brought her along. Papa, Thea clapped her hands, attracting the attention of the others. Good idea, really good idea. She gave Barbara a thumbs up. Did you come up with this idea while sitting with a gorilla and eating cookies? Thea looked at her seriously. Chapter 52 The Urgent Matter. Felicity couldn't help but burst out laughing, nearly spitting out her Coke. She quickly ducked her head to show she was invisible. This showed Catwoman's quick reaction times. She almost laughed, but then realized she and Barbara were on the same side, and couldn't afford to make fun of each other. She used her powerful facial nerves to pull back her mouth muscles, looking from a distance like Mona Lisa's younger sister. Robin tried to speak up for his beloved, but when Thea entered the room, she had already returned to her usual attire. Anyone could tell she was a woman, and a beautiful one at that. Remembering Batman's advice to never mess with a woman, especially a beautiful one, Robin automatically switched to onlooker mode. You bastard. How dare you say that to me? Barbara was surprised that Thea would compliment her and then kick her into the gutter. Her only thought was, this woman is so mean. Thea wasn't angry. She studied the enraged Barbara. This woman was proud and arrogant, believing the world revolved around her, unconcerned with others' opinions. Her historical trajectory was strikingly similar. If she hadn't experienced something unexpected, she'd probably be like this now. Watching her hysteria, Thea's gaze held no resentment, only a hint of pathos, a touch of pity. What's that look? Explain it clearly. Do you have a better solution? Even though Barbara's rage was nearly full, she retained a measure of composure, likely due to the constant guidance of Batman, Commissioner Gordon, and the others. Thea was quite satisfied with her performance. If she had slammed the table and glared, Thea would have simply walked away, saying, I have nothing to do with Gotham exploding into a crater. First of all, can we beat Bane? I heard from Catwoman that he defeated Batman with his bare hands. Can we be stronger than Batman? Barbara said with a bit of contempt. What's the problem? You can use a gun. Why fight him in hand-to-hand combat? Have you studied the map? Bane is still staying in the City Hall building. The view there is very wide. It may be difficult to find the shooting angle for long-range sniping. Using a pistol may not be very effective, Barbara thought for a while. Then we can use missiles. The Wayne family has several hidden launch pads. Please, do you have the word reconnaissance in your dictionary? Thea was a little overwhelmed. She even thought that Batman's IQ would be lowered if he brought these guys with him every day. He instructed Felicity to transmit the data to the monitor inside the room, opened a photo, and said to the group, "This is what we saw through the security cameras inside City Hall. These people are hostages, right? I don't recognize them, but I compared them. The bald guy is your mayor, right? Is that black woman the prosecutor or the judge? Are you going to blow them all up with a missile?" Thea looked at her with a hint of amusement. Before Barbara could reply, Commissioner Gordon, who had been pretending to be invisible, hurriedly said, "No, we can't do that. We must rescue the hostages first. If all the government officials were killed by a superhero missile, it would definitely be headlines tomorrow. Batman wouldn't have to come back. These guys are his minions. As the boss, he should just run away." Barbara was also a little frustrated, but still said stubbornly, "So what do you say?" "I say what? Will you listen to me?" Thea smiled at the group. The group of friends and family exchanged a silent glance. Catwoman, leveraging the previous rapport, broke the silence. "Tell us your plan first. If it makes sense, we'll listen." This was said with no sincerity at all. Thea had no interest in leadership. Batman would be back in a few days, and they were just passing strangers to her. "I don't know your individual abilities, but I'm just offering my personal opinion. My opinion is that this guy poses no threat at the moment and can be dealt with later," Thea said, pointing to the camera's surveillance camera, which showed Bane in a daze. Indeed, Bane wasn't a threat at the moment. He wanted to go out and kill people, but he was afraid the hostages would escape. He had nothing to do if he stayed, so he was just about to untie the hostages and play cards. Seeing that the others, especially Barbara, were reluctant, Thea could only add fuel to the fire. "What's the most urgent matter right now? I don't think you've all understood. Is it this Bane in the picture? I know you're not afraid of sacrifice, but is there any point in risking your precious lives to save these officials? Even if we kill him, will rescuing a few high-ranking government officials solve the city's problems?" Thea said, glancing at Commissioner Gordon. "Those guys definitely can't do it." Gordon knew them all too well. In front of an outsider like Thea, he couldn't directly tell her they were corrupt and incompetent. He was being conscientious by not bombing them with missiles. The commissioner would never allow his precious daughter to risk her life rescuing these scumbags. Seeing the commissioner's clear stance, Thea knew she finally had some say. They're not in danger anyway. Instead of wasting precious time saving these guys, why not organize everyone to rescue the civilians in the city? "My partner has a plan for your reference," Thea said, motioning for Felicity to continue. Felicity, with the potential to become the president of the Palmer Group, wouldn't be shy. She confidently pulled up a map of Gotham City. "This is Gotham University where we are now. My plan is to establish a barrier between Harris Square and Adams Street. We will use this area as our actual control zone and call on citizens to move closer to us. At the same time, we will continue to summon scattered police officers and expand the control zone when possible until the crisis in the entire city is resolved." "I'm done." Felicity started speaking passionately but found that there was no response in the end, so her voice became lower. Barbara and Robin were a little dazed. Catwoman seemed to have figured something out. She said nervously, "Are you going to start a war? Set up fortifications, establish isolation zones? God, am I back to the war era?" "Selena, I don't know what to say, but I hope you can face the reality. Isn't it a war now? At least 1,500 criminals have escaped from Blackgate prison, plus hundreds of people from the mental hospital. Now the city is full of bad guys. Do we have to catch them one by one? How many citizens will die in this time?" Catwoman's thinking represents a large part of the thinking of superheroes, that is, no matter what the blame is, I will take it. To put it nicely, it is the courage to take responsibility, and to put it bluntly, it is too self-centered. Everyone thinks that the earth will not turn without them. Shia could guess that if she had not been involved in this incident, they would have killed Bane quickly and then spent a lot of time searching the city for the fugitive. The previous criminals and psychopaths were the result of arresting them within 10 years, and it should be easier this time because they all had criminal records, but it would roughly take 5 years to catch them. This was a good thing for cartoonists, who were secretly happy that all the characters could be reappeared. However, it was not a good thing for ordinary people in reality. Chapter 53 Choose a Leader for You. Catwoman's claim that she wants to turn Gotham into war is true. That's exactly what Thea is planning. She has no connection to Gotham, so volunteering is good enough. Do you really think she's morally bound to work for them for 5 years without pay? What a joke. Batman's friends and family are the epitome of being deeply poisoned by heroism. They believe the townspeople are fragile and can be blown away by a gust of wind, so they rush to the front lines for every major or minor event. The truth is, the townspeople are not that weak, and the villains are not that strong either. As long as they can unleash a vast sea of people's war, victory is almost certain in a place like Gotham where the military is relatively low. Heroes are willing to shoulder responsibility, and their guiding principle is with great power comes great responsibility. This approach isn't necessarily bad, but you have to choose the right time. The city is swarming with villains, and the situation is urgent. Planning to act as a small team and kill them one by one is simply unrealistic. The priority is to restore order and unite the citizens. After all, there are only a few villains, and the vast majority of citizens want to live a peaceful life. I have a suggestion. We should elect a leader. Batman's not around anymore. Seeing they were still silent, Thea had no choice but to deliver a drastic response. Oh, so that's your real purpose, Barbara scoffed, her expression akin to finally revealing her true colors. Thea genuinely felt a grudge against Barbara. They had no grudges, but she simply felt uncomfortable looking at her, and she believed she shared the same sentiment. Perhaps it was a natural incompatibility. Actually, when she thought about it, the two women she had always disliked were Barbara, Batgirl, and Laurel, Black Canary. Both of them were members of the Birds of Prey. They were a natural clash, indeed. She had had 2 long talks with Laurel, and theoretically, their relationship should remain harmonious. After all, whether Laurel ultimately chose Tommy or Oliver, she was still related to Thea. Both conversations were bland. They discussed jewelry, with Laurel remarking that her father, raising her and her sister, was living alone and their family was far from wealthy. They also discussed law, with Thea feeling she wouldn't be able to comply with the various legal requirements if she pursued a heroic path. The final outcome of their discussion could be described as diplomatic, a harmonious exchange of opinions. As the saying goes, each talking his own way, nothing was achieved. Thea felt that this heroine, despite her lack of skill, was a complete mismatch for her, so she didn't directly answer Barbara's question. She glanced at the others, hoping to understand their differing opinions. Robin remained silent, as usual. Catwoman, while wanting to support Thea, remained silent out of concern for the team's unity. Commissioner Gordon remained a silent observer in these meetings, never saying a word. It wasn't that the Bat team disregarded the commissioner, but rather that the long-standing tradition was for the heroes to fight the villains while the police cleaned up the mess. Commissioner Gordon, considering all factors, acquiesced to this collaborative approach. Is this really the daily routine of Batman's team? The boss says what the subordinates do, and seeing their half-hearted attitude, Thea assumed they were acquiescing. All right. I propose that Commissioner Gordon take full leadership, while we form a small team, reporting directly to the old commissioner. What do you think? Thea said, glancing around the crowd, carefully admiring their expressions. Barbara's expression was the most interesting. She had been a little dazed, and when she vaguely heard Gordon, she thought Thea had chosen her as the leader. But when she thought the whole sentence over, she realized the title of commissioner at the beginning, and she was unsure whether to agree or disagree with accepting her father's leadership. Robin, who had been silent until then, reacted quickly and clearly, nodding his head. Miss Thea, you're absolutely right. Commissioner Gordon leading us is a good idea, he said, giving his father-in-law an ingratiating smile. Catwoman had even less reason to object. She had known Gordon, the new police officer, since she was a teenager. Though they weren't related by blood, Gordon looked after her like a half-father. If it weren't for the police chief's protection, her petty thief would have been arrested long ago. Felicity nodded, making her presence felt. Commissioner Gordon was a little confused by this. How had he suddenly gone from attending meetings to speaking at the podium? The world was changing so quickly, but seeing that no one, especially the Bat team, objected, they happily accepted the situation. At his age, leading these young people wasn't a problem for anyone. In fact, Batman was capable of leadership. Bruce had been bossed around by him as a child, but it was only after Bruce returned from training with a stronger fist that the master-servant relationship changed. Ultimately, it all came down to strength. Thea was relieved to see him smoothly take over the leadership. Following those guys' orders would have been enough to make her die. If she were to seize leadership, they would surely refuse. Even if she were to forcefully take over the team, the result would inevitably be a split. Besides, she was just a bystander, so there was no need to lead the charge. Now that a veteran was willing to take on this difficult task, it was the best option. As for whether Commissioner Gordon would attract too much hatred and put his life in danger, Thea felt that he had attracted such hatred for over 30 years, and since he was still fully intact, a few more days of added burden would be no problem. After handing over the heavy burden, Thea leaned back in her chair with a sense of relief. She had already sensed the gravity of the situation on the plane, and after seeing the current state of Gotham, she felt a previous statement needed an even greater emphasis. It was like she had just reached the maximum level and was immediately dragged into a group of friends and family, only to discover upon joining that the leader and tank had been abducted, leaving the remaining damage dealers to go off and explore new lands without a care in the world. How could she bear this? She had originally planned to choose one of the current members as the leader, but after seeing the performance of the others, she had to give up. In desperation, she chose a member of the reserve group as the leader, Commissioner Gordon. Compared to Batman's golden thighs, this one is only a golden calf, but it still provides support. Commissioner Gordon honestly agrees with Thea's previous idea. If every crisis relied on the same few heroes, what would the police department be? Wouldn't his life's work be in vain? He simply didn't speak out in support because of his daughter's rift with her. Although Thea didn't say anything harsh, he could still hear her dissatisfaction with the Bat team's approach. In fact, Commissioner Gordon also disagreed with Batman's method of using fear to fight evil. His initial misunderstanding, anger, numbness, and ultimate compromise were the result of a profound psychological struggle. Now, seeing that this daughter of Star City seemed to have a different approach, more positive and rational, the flame of hope that had been abandoned was rekindled. Perhaps she would bring a new way of choosing to Gotham. Chapter 54 Chinese Restaurant Chat? At the end of the meeting, Felicity made another show of force. While the others were chatting, she hacked 2 drones and returned. Although they were commercial aircraft and unarmed, they still impressed even the clueless Commissioner Gordon. Barbara, always a self-proclaimed computer whiz, even gave him a look of if there's you, why not lying. Commissioner Gordon immediately dragged Felicity to set up a defense, while telling the others to rest. Yes, heroes weren't needed for some mundane tasks. That was one of Thea's goals, moving from a frontline role to a secondary role. Many tasks are simply inconvenient for heroes. For example, to summon civilians to evacuate a war zone, police could simply knock on doors and say, "Fellow, open the door, check the water meter." Upon seeing the police, the occupants would follow without a word. In the midst of war, not even water meters or belongings were worth mentioning. The heroes couldn't handle it. Who would dare follow you, hiding behind a black mask? What if the bad guys tricked them into going somewhere and then did something to them? These days, people are so liberated. Before, only women were in danger, but now, both men and women are. Barbara insisted on playing her part, using her real identity to help her father. Robin had no choice but to change her identity and follow. Catwoman stood there, a little dazed. She wanted to help, but honestly, she felt uncomfortable being around dozens of police officers. She was afraid one of them would suddenly go crazy, raise his badge and pistol, and yell, "Hands up! I'm the GCPD." This scene had played out in her childhood dreams countless times. Even now, despite turning over a new leaf, it still occasionally resurfaced in her mind. Seeing her lost in thought, Thea dragged her out without a word. It was a rare opportunity for her to come here, so it would be a waste if she didn't explore. Catwoman, finding an excuse, muttered something about whether they should go help, then sprinted off the campus with Thea in tow. While Gotham, a cosmopolitan city, endured constant hardship, it still offered its fair share of temptations. Take, for example, the food before her, heavily influenced by British dark cuisine, with a recurring American menu. Thea's burgers, steaks, and pizza left her feeling nauseous. She and Catwoman wandered through the relatively peaceful neighborhoods and stumbled upon a Chinese-style restaurant, much to her delight. Although Catwoman had claimed the restaurant had a triad connection, the city was now so full of bad guys that even small-time triads could be considered decent citizens. Seeing that even the rich girl wasn't afraid, Catwoman was even less so. She had grown up in this chaotic place, and returning to this chaotic place was like returning home. To say she was like a fish in water was a bit of an exaggeration, but it was indeed much more comfortable than staying in an upscale community. This might be the source of the disagreement between her and Barbara. Barbara's mother left the family when she was 10 years old, leaving her daughter with several large properties in Gotham before leaving. So even though Commissioner Gordon was as incorruptible as noodles, the father and daughter lived in poverty. Barbara was definitely not poor as a child, and could be considered above middle class. The conflict between Catwoman and her has been going on for a long time. Catwoman thinks, "I'm so elegant. How can you call me vulgar?" Barbara thinks, "I'm so well-educated. How can you call me arrogant?" Coupled with Catwoman's long experience with Bruce, she constantly compares him to Barbara. While Bruce's chivalry is a factor, Catwoman sees the Wayne family as the epitome of the upper class. Compared to the petty bourgeoisie of Barbara, she feels a sense of unease. "Look, the Waynes are so wealthy and so modest, so what's so great about your family's meagerness?" Conflicts and misunderstandings escalate. Both women harbor minor flaws, but their mutual dislike for each other exaggerates them. Although Batman, a self-taught psychology graduate with a doctorate, and Commissioner Gordon, now over 60 years old, recognize their conflict and try to reconcile their differences, the results are limited. Batman has lived a life of hatred and never had a girlfriend, while Gordon's marriage was short-lived, effectively leaving him single for half his life. Neither understands the psychology of women, and their conflicts are often trivial, yet they remain oblivious to the factual and rational arguments they employ against criminals. The rift that might have been mended was completely shattered by their endless chatter about the future and life. Now, when they were in a good mood, they greet each other with "nice weather today" or "have you eaten?" When they were in a bad mood, they pretend not to know each other. The result is a permanent neutral relationship between them. Now Catwoman has met Thea, a similarly wealthy but carefree woman. They surprisingly get along well. They can't even engage in a life or death conversation, but they're more like friends. This time, when she went for help, she readily offered to help, further confirming her belief that the richer you are, the more polite you are. They went into a restaurant and ordered a few dishes. The food was essentially an Americanized take on Chinese cuisine. I wonder what's going on with these foreign foodies? Perhaps they've been paid by McDonald's and KFC to tout the health benefits of fried food, even claiming it's healthiest and that boiled food loses too much nutrients. This has dealt a heavy blow to the entire Chinese dining scene, not to mention Japanese raw food. Some Japanese restaurants stubbornly maintained the tradition of serving raw food, while more flexible Chinese restaurants simply followed local customs. "You like deep frying, then we'll fry it," Thea said, adding lots of oil and salt. "We'll fry everything, from fried meatballs to fried fish." Thea searched for something lighter but couldn't find anything. She ordered a few dishes, including a fish, and began to eat with Catwoman. Whether it was because of her name or just her preference, Catwoman immediately set her sights on the fish and began to eat with a beaming excitement. A foreigner could handle chopsticks just as well as Thea, showing remarkable skill. Seeing her devour the fish, Thea picked up a couple of chopsticks. It tasted delicious. It was braised. "What's your relationship with Bruce?" Thea had been holding back this gossip question for a long time. "It's rare that you two have known each other since childhood and haven't confirmed your relationship yet. Didn't you see Talia strike when she needed to, dragging Batman, this mighty and majestic man, with an indescribable movement? Now her child is old enough to help with the housework, she has risen from a third party to the position of the original wife. And you, your childhood sweetheart, have fared so poorly." Catwoman was confused. Their relationship should have been a natural development long ago, with exchanges first on hardware and then on software. With both being martial arts masters, they had mastered many moves and done everything they should and shouldn't do. But she still felt uneasy, especially after learning that Batman actually had a son. This uneasiness became a breakthrough point, and the conflict between the two became more and more obvious. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 55, Comparison of Miserability. Perhaps Catwoman's long experience in Gotham's underworld and countless encounters with villains has left her feeling distant from people, especially men. Furthermore, she and Batman have known each other since childhood, creating a sense of kinship, Perhaps the common saying too familiar to be easy to take on, transforming this family relationship into a romantic one requires considerable mental fortitude. Unfortunately, Bruce lost his parents at the age of 8 and was raised by his old butler, Alfred. Naturally, the butler couldn't discuss sexual matters with an 8-year-old when he was young. By the time Bruce was old enough to engage in the conversation, the butler was already buried in the ground. Talking about women with an old man whose physical functions have completely degenerated is a cruel proposition, and Bruce certainly couldn't do it. A closer look reveals Batman's lack of understanding of relationships. Unlike Oliver, who spent 20 years as a hero, his mind was preoccupied with revenge since childhood, and as an adult, he had to redeem the city and terrorize criminals. His daily grind was so intense that he had no time to ponder how to handle women under the moonlight. Plus, with only a few men around, it was hard to know who to turn to for communication. Alfred, at his age, was the first to give up. Robin had always considered him a mentor, and he couldn't bring himself to discuss women with his apprentice, so he gave up on that, too. Commissioner Gordon was married, but his wife had her own issues, struggling with her homosexuality and abandoning her husband and daughter. Commissioner Gordon, honestly, had been single for half his life and couldn't offer much guidance. So Batman's feelings for Catwoman dragged on. Catwoman, unaware of his feelings, waited patiently, their relationship dragging on. If nothing unexpected had happened, it would have worked out. It didn't matter who they were with, and finally, they could make do. But then Talia's sudden intervention shattered their tacit understanding. South Darbert was supposed to have a subtropical climate, and Talia, with her fiery passion, ignored Catwoman's assertions of sovereignty and dragged Batman into a half-hearted friendly match. The Ninja Master, who had trained Batman, was delighted to have him as his son-in-law, publicly and privately declaring, "He's a perfect son-in-law for me." To help his daughter tie Batman to his heart, the Master used his profound knowledge of alchemy to concoct a long-lost imperial potion. 10 months later, Damian Wayne was born. This is a classic example of how knowledge can transform destiny. When Batman learned the truth, he couldn't find anyone to vent his anger on. The Master was truly kind, teaching him martial arts without asking for anything in return, offering his daughter no dowry, and even personally concocting the secret potion, many of which were extinct. To ensure the Wayne family continued its lineage, the Master was truly willing to go all out. With such exemplary deeds, he easily earned the title of National Good Father-in-Law. Talia, on the other hand, couldn't be blamed. The child was his own, not the Wang family's. After much deliberation, Batman decided to flee. On a dark and stormy night, without his white steed or his 3 apprentices, Mr. Bruce fled in a flash, wandering the world for years until the storm had died down before returning to Gotham. Talia, enraged, chased her husband across thousands of miles, believing his actions were 99% responsible for Gotham's current situation. Catwoman felt aggrieved, sad, and a bit worried. She didn't know what to do. On the one hand, she didn't want to abandon Gotham, it was her home, but on the other, she didn't want to fight. She'd traveled thousands of miles with her children to find her husband. While breaking his spine was a bit extreme, it was also a form of domestic violence. Perhaps that was just how they'd been together. What right did she have to get involved? No matter how she looked at it, her role was just that of a lover. It was a rare opportunity to meet Thea, who had nothing better to do and enjoyed listening to his ramblings. Since she wasn't familiar with the team and they'd all be going their separate ways in a couple of days, she felt free to unburden herself and unloaded on her troubles. After a few words, Thea understood the general idea. She sighed inwardly. It was a problem that could have been easily solved, but these people had made it into such a fuss. Batman, having self-studied countless psychology books, is truly a giant in theory but a dwarf in reality. No wonder he's been stuck on scaring villains for 30 years without wavering. As the saying goes, apply what you learn. He must have learned a lot, a wealth of knowledge that wouldn't even begin to describe him. But just how much he's put into practice is clear from the current state of Gotham. It's all for naught. While Thea hadn't studied any extensive texts, she could still discern Catwoman's current situation. Her subconscious desire to fight, whether it was against the villains or Talia, was undeniably awkward. It was Batman's hesitation that had put her in an awkward position. He lacked a psychological outlet. If he were Batman, he could handle the situation with a few words, but since he wasn't, he had to resort to a roundabout approach. He'd be pitting himself against her. This tactic works especially well when someone in real life is pouring out their misery. For example, if you say your father ran away when you were 12, and you've been dependent on your mother ever since? Look at me. My grandfather was killed by the Japanese invaders when he was only 9. But I'm still alive and well, aren't I? The most important thing in life is to be happy, right? It made perfect sense to the other person. Comparing it to her own experiences, she realized there was no worst, only worse. She immediately mentally prepared herself and revived. That's what Thea was doing now. She'd artistically reinterpreted her own painful experiences, keeping Malcolm hidden of course. She'd only talked about how she missed her father and brother, how her mother wanted to remarry, and all her misfortunes, a story that was both heartbreaking and moving. Catwoman was truly stunned by her tragic story. Comparing it to her own past, she realized that while her life had been a little harder materially, it hadn't been this difficult. Her childhood and youth had been pretty good. Contemplating this, she suddenly felt the words drift across her horizon, "That's nothing." Then Thea went on to lament the hardships of living in a wealthy family, the spying of shareholders, the framing of her peers, the kidnapping and extortion by criminals. In short, how easy had it been for me to live this long? Catwoman automatically imagined Bruce's parents being murdered as a child. And then thought about those awful shareholders of Wayne Enterprises. Batman had spent 20 years trying to regain full control of the company, yet they were all competing for money. He could not stop them, and they were desperate for money, fearless of death. As Thea's story became more and more exciting, Catwoman could only sigh. As expected, the lives of the rich were also full of misfortunes. They truly cared much more than ordinary people like her. Chapter 56. What's going on? Thea and Catwoman's conversation grew increasingly cheerful, and as they compared their life trajectories, they discovered a surprising synergy. Regarding her and Batman's relationship, Thea advised her to step up her game. After all, you've known each other for so many years, you know his strengths and weaknesses, and he knows yours, so what's there to be afraid of? Go ahead and pursue him boldly. It's easy for a woman to pursue a man, and it's easy. It's actually quite strange, but Gotham is a place that attracts wealth but not relationships. I wonder if it's feng shui, but every couple that was supposed to be successful has ended up breaking up. Take Batman and Catwoman, Gordon and Barbara's mother, the Riddler and that woman, everyone has fizzled out. Oh, no, except for the domineering Joker and Harley Quinn, the rest have fizzled out. Perhaps the feng shui of this place couldn't withstand the Joker's madness. By the way, have you ever been on a date? Thea expressed doubts about the serious Bruce even knowing that dating is necessary for a relationship. We only went out once, Catwoman said, a little embarrassed, glancing down at her. That time we went to Star City, so, your date consisted of a scene at our place? Sure enough, you're asking for trouble. Is this Gotham's way of expressing romance? It's quite unique. Don't you usually give each other gifts or anything? Yes, he gave me my gloves and whip. Catwoman's expression of joy made Thea shudder. Oh, I was wrong to call Batman slow at first. You're not much better. Just as Thea was about to give her a good lecture on the 108 do's and don'ts of dating, hurry up, everyone. A young man dressed as a restaurant worker led several burly men armed with pistols and hurried towards the kitchen. Thea looked at Catwoman. What was going on? These men didn't look like they were going to wash dishes in the back because they couldn't pay. Were they trying to reason with the restaurant owner with pistols? Catwoman ignored Thea's surprised look, took a bite of fish, and said slowly, probably a protection racket. It's nothing to be surprised about, you just get used to it. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Listening to the bang-bang of gunfire inside, the diners around her seemed calm, eating and drinking as usual. Perhaps that's just the way they are here? With this interruption, the two of them couldn't talk about their love lives anymore. They began chatting about Thea's skateboard. Catwoman was very measured, asking only about the design concept and refusing to ask about the technical details. The two of them focused on practical aspects. Honestly, the technical barrier to entry for this skateboard wasn't very high. Thea hadn't seen the data for the Green Goblin skateboard, she had simply copied the design from her imagination and cobbled together a similar one. Who was more foolish than the other? If you could copy someone else, you could, too. You couldn't claim intellectual property rights for this thing. Putting aside others, Batman's intelligence aside, saying it was effortless might be a bit of an understatement for Thea and Felicity's work, but even after months of seclusion, they were still able to create something with comparable performance. So, Regarding Catwoman's question, Thea's attitude was, if you ask me, I'll tell you. If you haven't asked, forget it. Just as she was sketching out a few design points, several more burly men, armed with AKs, rushed into the kitchen. Thea looked at Catwoman again. Did this restaurant even require an interview to wash dishes? Were these people from the same hometown as the previous group? Did the previous group think it was a quick money-making job and easy, and called out to their friends, the boss is stupid and has a lot of money, come quickly? Catwoman was also a little surprised, unconsciously peeking inside. Come on, you're Catwoman, not Giraffe Woman. What can you see from dozens of meters away, separated by a wall? Catwoman didn't seem embarrassed when she realized she saw nothing. She elegantly lit a cigarette and waved her hands to Thea, saying, that's just how it is here. Sorry to have embarrassed the people of Star City. Thea also expressed admiration for the vibrant lifestyle of Gotham's inhabitants. The topic of weapons had fallen out of favor, so the conversation shifted to Thea's current preoccupation, how to fight in high heels. Catwoman nearly laughed out loud at this question. This was exactly what she was proud of. In her previous relationships, including her skateboarding career, she'd always been on the listening side, the recipient of instruction, the receiver. Now, finally, she could finally hold her head high. Thea, even a little girl has her moments. Let me teach you a lesson. It's time for me to take the lead. She then recounted her experience in detail, which echoed Ms. Shiva's, but more in terms of actual combat experience. Perhaps Catwoman suffered some kind of childhood trauma, or perhaps she harbored some psychological issues as a Gotham citizen, but she seemed to have some sensory impairment. Her self-awareness was completely focused on height. She instantly radiated confidence in high heels, but her aura plummeted in flats. She was 5 feet 7 inches tall, yet she wore high heels every day, looking like 5 feet 8 inches from a distance. This height put off many suitors. After all, she was arguably the most beautiful woman Thea had ever met, not to mention her figure. As a child, she'd feed stray cats, stealing milk and letting the kittens drink half, while she drank the other half. Her figure captivated even Thea, a woman of the same sex. Just as she was listening intently to Catwoman's combat insights, footsteps rang out. 3 gang members, each armed with a machine gun and another with a bazooka, barreled past Thea's table. This time, Thea didn't need to signal. Catwoman could tell something was amiss. Within moments, all 3 groups had charged in. The last few armed with bazookas made it clear this wasn't just a gang dispute. Both women had a premonition, they wouldn't have to pay for their meal. They say women have a sixth sense. With a loud boom, the restaurant fell silent. But the silence didn't last for a few seconds before screams emanated from the kitchen. Run, run! The men who had gone in earlier were seen running out like mad, their faces covered in blood. Some were throwing weapons as they ran. One bald, burly man was particularly eye-catching. He didn't even use the door, but instead wrapped his head with his clothes, found a weak spot on the wall, and with a loud bang, he smashed through it and rushed out. Thea was stunned. A modern-day successor to the Ironhead Kung Fu? He was truly a tough guy, but what was going on? The 2 women exchanged a glance. Seeing the men running as if they had more legs, Catwoman knew something was wrong. Thea could understand Chinese, but their accents were so Americanized, a mix of Chinese and Western. All she could hear was the word run. I hate these kinds of emergencies. Thea hadn't brought any equipment with her, thinking she'd be safe in the police-controlled area. Now it was too late to regret. Catwoman was also dressed in casual clothes, carrying only a dagger, but given the chaos around her, she had no intention of performing her 72-10 kicks in public. Since we can't go up and fight the monster, let's run. Catwoman pulled Shia and ran out. Chapter 57 Killer Croc. Both women were agile heroes, their long legs stretching out like a lightning bolt. They weren't aiming to outrun the Flash, just outrun the restaurant's patrons. They gave the crowd a live version of Run, Sisters. They ran out of the restaurant, found a clear view, and joined the throng of onlookers. Since no one knew what was going on, Catwoman, as hosts, felt obliged to help. Plus, she was a bit curious. Under Thea's watchful eye, she found a gangster who had been in the kitchen before, cornered him, and gave him a beating before returning to Thea. It's Killer Croc. He seems to have emerged from the sewers and killed 2 people on the scene. I didn't expect him to be released. Thea didn't ask who it was. She knew Batman's team had dealt with him before, which made things easier. This showed they had a strategy. Once you've experienced it, you're not going away. Many villains are incredibly powerful early on, only to become side characters later, replaced by new villains. The key point here is that the heroes have a strategy. The same tactics won't work on a Saint Seiya the second time around. This is a similar theme here. Many villains possess mutant powers. The first fight might be brutal, but a second one is easy. Superpowers are temporary, but technology is lifelong. Thea became increasingly resolute in her technological advancement strategy. That's just the way it is. She couldn't do otherwise, the situation forced her. If she had Kryptonian blood, she'd be sunbathing on a beach by now. Who would still be practicing martial arts? There's no other choice. Just as Catwoman was about to explain the strategy, the outer wall of a nearby Chinese restaurant shattered instantly, bringing the entire structure with it, slowly collapsing, ultimately reducing it to rubble as everyone watched. What a shame. This restaurant's fish is really good, Catwoman muttered, and Thea could only admire the mental fortitude of the people of Gotham. Let's go, Catwoman said, pulling Thea out. Leaving already? Where were their promised friends, the city guardians of justice? It would be bad if we just walked away like this. After all, we have eaten a lot of food and haven't paid yet. We should help if we can. Didn't you see that the restaurant owner has fainted in the toilet crying? Catwoman seemed to know the doubts in her heart and patiently explained, according to Killer Croc's past habits, he won't go to land when there are dense crowds. He often hangs out in places with water such as sewers. Let's go back to change clothes and get equipment. He won't run too far. There is a small artificial lake not far from here. He will most likely go there. Hearing that they would have to fight in the water, Thea was a little confused. If she went into the water, her equipment would be completely useless because she had never tested it underwater, and she had never heard that the hero could shoot arrows underwater. Besides, she was very resistant to getting wet. If they were going to go into the water, she could only support them mentally. As the two were rushing back, Thea's phone rang. Felicity's voice rang through the phone. Thea, are you still there? Listen, that Killer Croc is in a man-made lake not far from you. Their naming is terrible, she muttered softly. Robin's already on his way there, and Barbara is a little worried. Go help him. Thea held the taciturn Robin in higher regard. After all, he was Batman's first disciple. Meaning Batman would have made him his son-in-law if he didn't have a daughter. While Felicity didn't say the situation was serious, she knew it was dangerous. There's no time to get our equipment. Let's just go through it. Thea hung up the phone and turned to Catwoman for her opinion. Catwoman was even more concerned for her teammates. She wouldn't leave even Barbara, who she clashed with, unhelpfully. With her leading the way, the two of them ran towards the man-made lake. The area grew increasingly secluded, with trees growing thicker and fewer signs of pedestrians. As they crossed a sandy patch, Thea finally spotted the so-called artificial lake. It appeared to be a vast amusement park, completely abandoned and in disrepair. The dilapidated carousel and the shattered Ferris wheel added a gloomy touch to this once joyful place. The lake was located in the northern corner of the park. As the two approached, they discovered Robin, baton in hand, already engaged in combat with Killer Croc. Thea's first impression was that the creature was truly unsightly. From its appearance alone, it could be seen that it was a bipedal, almost humanoid monster. Its upper body was naked, its body covered in dense, dark gray scales, its head enormous, and its mouth filled with fangs. It stood at over 2 meters and 2 inches tall, and judging by its thick arms and legs, it must have weighed over 500 pounds. Thea shook her head, wondering how much food it must have eaten in a day. How did this guy become like this? Was it a vicious experiment or biochemical modification? Seeing Robin's battle with the giant without showing any signs of defeat, Thea turned to Catwoman, unfazed. She wanted to learn more, but it was actually to satisfy her curiosity. This creature, let's call it human, was so bizarre. Look at his fangs and his massive claws. With this appearance, you Gotham people are still allowing him to live happily to this day, without any dissection or sectioning. Your torch relay of love is well done. Catwoman pondered for a moment. Bruce collected his cells. From what we know so far, he hasn't been experimented on or modified. He's just an ordinary human, with a few atavisms. She watched Killer Croc in the distance, punching and kicking Robin while nibbling his jaws with dexterity. Was there a few in that? This guy looked so different that even his own mother wouldn't recognize him. You're telling me he's an ordinary human? Are you kidding me? If this guy were an ordinary human, I'd be Superman's great-grandmother. Catwoman glanced over, seeing Thea's face furrowed in a frown, her eyebrows raised. Knowing she didn't believe him, she decided not to take the blame. This conclusion is all Bruce's analysis. If you have any questions, ask him when he gets back. With that, the subject was dropped, and the two of them focused on the fight between Robin and Killer Croc. It didn't take long for Thea to realize that Killer Croc had no training at all. He knew no punches or kicks, only a methodical, horizontal punch and vertical kick. From this perspective, Batman wasn't exaggerating when he called him just an ordinary person. She took another look at Robin's fighting prowess. This Barbara suitor had struck Thea as a quiet and reserved individual, but she hadn't expected his fighting style to be so passionate. His long black hair danced in the wind, and from time to time, he could hear his hearty roars and the clacking sound of his club hitting Killer Croc. His strength was truly impressive. Batman's years of training had truly been well spent. Thea was confident that without the use of technological equipment, she could be a cut above him, but there was also a certain element of luck involved, and it wasn't a sure win. A major mistake could have left her vulnerable. The situation now resembled a martial artist fighting a stronger, ordinary man. While every punch and kick from that ordinary man was deadly, his immense strength was meaningless if it couldn't reach his opponent. Robin had already secured victory. Chapter 58 Robin vs. Killer Croc. Robin naturally noticed the two women approaching. As the heir to Batman, a man with a touch of mysophobia, he was also quite chivalrous. He shouted, "Stay away, I can handle him." Hearing this, Thea felt relieved. In reality, she had no intention of going to help. This Killer Croc had appeared from nowhere, his scales coated in a particularly disgusting slime that made her feel sick. Catwoman, having grown up in the slums, had a certain tolerance for slime. But a slight shift in the wind had just blew a rotten odor towards her from the battle. Catwoman, caught off guard, quickly ducked to the side. The stench was too much. She was known as Catwoman, and while she wasn't as skilled as a cat, her vision and sense of smell were incredibly sharp. The sudden stench nearly made her vomit her lunch. The two women exchanged glances, understanding each other. Surprisingly, neither showed any intention of charging forward, and they breathed a sigh of relief. They each thought, "It's not that I'm afraid of the dirt, or the stink, it's that I'm upholding Robin's masculine dignity. If I can't, I won't." As if it were just yesterday, the two women, just like they had been watching Batman vs. Shiva, stood by, arms crossed, watching and commenting from the sidelines. Robin had no idea what was going on. He shouted no, but inwardly, he was thinking, hurry up and charge. We'll be the bastards together. He didn't have rhinitis, and after 10 minutes of inhaling the stench, his nose was practically numb. He had expected his shouting to provoke the two heroes to rush over and help. To his surprise, the two women stood quietly by, watching. What was going on? Robin was puzzled. Catwoman was always kind-hearted, she wouldn't stand by and watch someone in need. The problem lay with this girl from Star City? Did you people in Star City have such a low crime rate? Was it because you were so honest, saying no when you said no? Robin had always believed that Gothamites were two-faced, a fact that deeply irritated his honest nature. But today, Star City's honest behavior caught him by surprise, and he unexpectedly missed Gotham's cunning ways. Sure enough, there's always a place to hide, even Gothamites have their merits. Unaware that her actions had already given Star City a certain reputation, Thea pondered how to deal with this enemy with a naturally stinky aura, but after much deliberation, she couldn't come up with a good idea. Perhaps this was the natural enemy of female heroes. Not only herself, but even Supergirl and Wonder Woman wouldn't dare engage him in close combat, would they? Seeing how slimy he looked, Robin's club sent a shower of unspeakable debris flying every time it struck him. Would Wonder Woman dare throw her lasso? Or strike with her sword? Unless she was ready for a new one. The best way to deal with this guy is to fire a freezing arrow from a distance, freezing him into a giant block of ice. Then, bury him deep underground, safe and air pollution free. Perhaps his slime could even promote plant growth? Thea's thoughts grew increasingly nauseous. Even as she was daydreaming, the battle had already been decided. Robin, with a Sambo joint technique, broke Killer Croc's left hand, or claw. Immediately, sheathing his short club, he threw his foe over his shoulder, intending to throw him. However, he misjudged his opponent's weight and his own strength. He only completed the throw halfway, It landed, but the force was barely enough. Whether frightened or simply timid, Killer Croc didn't seize the opportunity to attack, instead darting into the lake. When he reached the center of the lake, he emerged from the water again to challenge Robin. Perhaps due to his degenerated vocal cords, the sound coming out of his mouth wasn't human, but rather a meaningless roar. The two women couldn't stand watching any longer and hurried towards Robin, but after a few steps, they both stopped simultaneously. There was nothing they could do. Robin was still reeking of something, especially after that final shoulder throw, which had left him stained with all sorts of goo. His once black and red tights were now covered in white and green patches of slime, a truly disgusting sight. Thea gestured to Catwoman, saying, "I'm not familiar with him. You're a teammate, go and negotiate." Meanwhile, she thought mischievously, "Robin, if you're acting like this, you'll have to shower 8 times before Barbara won't let you in." Catwoman couldn't blame Thea for her lack of loyalty. This was her teammate, and staying away was a bit excessive. She could only hold her nose and approach him. Robin, like Batman, appeared to be tolerant of women, but in reality, he simply didn't know how to talk to them. The way he followed Barbara around in silence every day proved it. He was a docile, almost mute, boy. So, let alone the two women just watching, even if they were to taunt him or even stab him in the back, he would only ask why and if there was any reason, not retaliate. "Are you okay?" Catwoman tried to block her sense of smell, implying she didn't smell anything, recalling the delicious smell of fried, grilled, and pan-fried fish. "What? Crocodiles are fish? Crocodiles are fish? They're reptiles," and Catwoman, who is very sensitive to fish, would tell everyone that they have nothing to do with fish. No, Robin, his blood boiling, didn't realize how many attachments he had on him. Even though the enemy had fled, the stench lingered around his nasal mucosa, and he wondered if his nose was damaged. He'd go back and get a doctor to check him out. Superheroes don't have health insurance, so any medical issues require immediate medical attention. He was a little annoyed when Killer Croc, still surfacing from the water to challenge him, didn't get far away. It wasn't just Thea. Batman's team wasn't good at water combat, or rather, no superhero, except Aquaman, had the habit of fighting underwater. So, when faced with such a guy, there was really no other option but to trick him into coming onto land. "Come up here if you dare, I'll kill you with one hand," Robin taunted, trying to draw him out first. "Come down if you dare, I'll give you 2 legs." Killer Croc was no fool, he had the intelligence of an average person. Seeing that Thea and Catwoman were standing a bit further away, they were still surrounding him. How could he possibly go up and kill himself when he couldn't even defeat Robin? Then came the verbal battle. "Come down, come up, come down if you dare, come up if you dare." The two exchanged barbs from a distance for 5 minutes, proving that no one was any less foolish these days. Killer Croc wasn't fooled at all, remaining steady on the surface, his temper rising. He thought to himself, "Even if you have help, I'm not afraid of being underwater. I'll fight you to death, and I'll piss you off." Just as the two sides were locked in a stalemate, a motorcycle sped towards them, approaching from a distance. Chapter 59, Where's the promised strategy? "Hey, it's Barbara. You're here quick." Catwoman, with her sharp eyesight, was the first to spot the newcomer. And sure enough, Batgirl, clad in a black cape, yellow gloves, and yellow boots, sped towards the group like a gust of wind. "Robin, are you okay?" Barbara ignored the two women watching the spectacle. Seeing Robin standing by the lake, hands on his hips, panting, she assumed he was injured. In reality, Robin had simply gotten a stitch in the side from shouting too hard. He wasn't like Killer Croc, who stood 6 feet tall, weighed over 500 pounds, and whose voice was as deep as thunder. He was just an ordinary man, even skinny for a hero. Acting like a human megaphone at the top of his lungs for 5 minutes must have been exhausting. Seeing he didn't respond, Barbara assumed he was seriously injured. She glanced at the two women standing up right beside her. "You're going too far." She threw her motorcycle aside and sped towards Robin. "Huh? And you blame us?" Thea thought this person was completely clueless, taking everything for granted and judging everything by their own perspective. Anything that agreed with her was right, anything that differed was wrong. She ran over to grab Robin and gave Catwoman a playful look, both of them adopting expressions of anticipation. Ouch! Barbara ran incredibly fast, evidently showing a deep bond between her and Robin. But when she was 2 meters away, she realized something was wrong. Robin's white and green uniform made his otherwise serious combat uniform look like a scavenger's. It also carried a strong, pungent odor. Having been pampered since childhood, she had never smelled anything so foul. She quickly gestured to Robin to stop. In reality, Robin didn't move forward, but instead took a few steps back. He was naive, but not stupid. He had noticed something was wrong with him after all the cursing by the lake. If he offered his girlfriend a loving hug in this tattered state, there would be only two outcomes: either Barbara would be overwhelmed and turn evil, or he would be beaten to carbonization. There's no such thing as a breakup here. It's either you or me, and it makes no difference. Seeing her boyfriend didn't lunge at her, Barbara breathed a sigh of relief. She took another close look at his accessories, feeling increasingly disgusted. She backed away. When she could no longer smell the pungent smell, she found herself standing next to the two women. She said gruffly, "Did you know that? Are you happy? Laugh if you want," Thea chuckled, not even trying to give her face, embodying the simple, optimistic spirit of the Star City people. "Since you agreed to laugh, then I'll laugh too." Watching the two of them was like a stage play. It was truly hilarious. If they just recited a few lines from Romeo and Juliet, the effect would have been even better. Catwoman couldn't be so heartless. She still had to stay in the team. She suppressed a smile and changed the subject. "What's next?" "Yes, what's next?" The five-person team had gathered. Although there were no cameras, Thea could see a drone hovering over them. Felicity had already automatically taken the mascot position, cheering everyone on. "But the four of us are all DPS, and all of us agile DPS at that. Against this tough, obviously strength-oriented boss, this team's configuration is awful, especially considering two of us haven't got any gear. We're not even going to win. Let's retreat." Unaware of her inner thoughts, Barbara politely asked, "Miss Thea, do you have any suggestions?" No, Thea had only been in Gotham for a short time. Catwoman had even given her the monster's name. Thinking of Catwoman naturally reminded her of her original question: how did you capture this guy before? Didn't he have this powerful stinking aura the last time you captured him? Or is this a skill he's recently mastered? Or perhaps he came up with it to deal with you guys during your seclusion? If so, this creature, nearly relegated to the Cretaceous period, is quite intelligent. How did you capture him before? In response to Thea's question, Barbara immediately stated that while she looked mature, she was still a child. She truly didn't know anything about her past. She suggested asking the woman next to her, who was in her 60s, for details. Catwoman pondered the matter and realized she had no recollection of the monster. Perhaps she was busy with her business at the time, robbing the rich to give to the poor? She only knew she hadn't encountered it herself. If she had, she would have been impressed. Seeing them both shaking their heads, Thea knew something was up. Luckily, there was someone who seemed to know something. She said to Barbara, "Call Robin over so we can ask him." They were not far away, so shouting at the top of their lungs would have been fine. But Thea was worried there might be some secret somewhere. She feared she and the others might hear, as would Killer Croc in the lake. It would be awkward to read a strategy in front of a boss, wouldn't it? So, calling Robin over and asking quietly was the best option. Barbara beckoned Robin, who was still dazed by the lake. "What's up?" Robin approached, but when he was 2 meters away, the three women raised their hands in a gesture of halting movement, forcing him to stand still. Barbara repeated the question. "I don't know either." "Don't you know?" Robin wondered. "If I knew, would I have been so devastated?" It was uncertain whether Barbara would even let him into the house tonight. "Do you think I'm crazy? I'm happy to be in this state." Everyone looked at each other, bewildered. Was Batman the only one who knew? He'd taken down the boss in seconds without anyone noticing? And he was nowhere to be found. Did Alfred know? Did Commissioner Gordon know? Thea was completely impressed by their team. Look at Batman. He records every enemy and every friend's power and countermeasure in his little black book. And you, on the other hand, don't even keep track of your own fights. What a bunch of sycophants. Finally, the three members of the Batman family looked at Thea, intending to ask their Star City counterpart for any advice. Of course, Thea had an idea. Her principle was to plan ahead. Just now, she'd figured out that this stinking, powerful creature would be best dealt with by freezing arrows. She'd stay far away and then, whoosh, fire a single shot. If she couldn't freeze him, she'd use 2. The problem was, she didn't have many arrows, and given the high cost, she only had 5. She'd originally planned to use them against Bane, a man with a massive head and thick neck, arms that could run horses and fists that could stand men. Perhaps his only weakness was his slowness. If they could limit his limited speed, a ranged attack would bring even the strongest opponent to their knees. The future was a matter of time, they needed to deal with the present first. Thea nodded. I have a plan, but I need to go back and get my equipment. You two hold him off. I'll be back soon. She picked up the motorcycle Barbara had ridden and headed out. Chapter 60, Keep going, don't stop. Take me with you, Catwoman, seeing her return, leaped onto the motorcycle. She hadn't brought any equipment with her, save for a single dagger. While the dagger might have some lethality against a normal person, it was no match for that regressive crocodile. We'll be back soon, hold him back first, Thea muttered, then slammed the accelerator, sending the motorcycle hurtling off. Easy as you say, but how do you hold him back? The remaining two exchanged a tender glance, and Barbara pointed toward the center of the lake. Keep cursing, don't stop, Robin considered saying, how about you take over the cursing? Just to satisfy your urge to rant? I've been yelling at the top of my lungs for almost 10 minutes now. While it's a verbal exchange, a form of mutual abuse, he can always take a sip of water to soothe his throat, while my throat is practically smoking. But seeing Barbara's unwavering gaze, he could only accept the arduous task with a mixture of pain and joy. He listened to his girlfriend and did whatever she told him to do. Then, let him scold her. Although swearing in front of his sweetheart somewhat undermined his usual image as an honest and polite young man, there were only two of them here, and he couldn't let Barbara do the scolding herself. A man should be a little tougher on himself. Come on. He opened the collar of his tight combat uniform. Normally, he didn't think it was a problem, but after shouting at the top of his lungs for 10 minutes, he realized that the collar was too breathable with the constant inhalation and vocalization, and his entire neck was covered in sweat. Barbara saw her boyfriend obediently scold her, and she felt happy. She felt that she still had some skills. Although her mother had run away long ago and her close friends were almost zero, she could still be considered a natural at controlling her husband, right? But after just 2 minutes, she realized something was amiss. Robin used to be a quiet man, his words are relentless, almost impervious to criticism. Batman's right, Barbara's right, he said. Today, in just a few minutes, the sharpness of his language and the viciousness of his subject matter were truly eye-opening. Furthermore, the brutality of his words was so distinct that no single one repeated itself. How could this be possible? Barbara's eyes grew fiercer. Had he been hiding something from her? The thought of him cheating on her made Barbara ignore Robin's strong scent. She grabbed him by the collar and demanded, "Who taught you that? Where is she?" If Robin even mentioned a place, she'd be on the run. She was putting the future of Gotham on hold, even if she wasn't happy herself. What good was it for the people of Gotham? Who taught you that? Oh, it was Miss Smoke. Robin was stunned by the question, not understanding what she meant. After thinking for a few times, he still couldn't figure out the logical relationship here, so he could only answer honestly, and pointed to the headset he was wearing. Is it Felicity? Barbara quickly took out her headset and put it on. Before she came out, Felicity specially handed her one, saying that it would be convenient for communication. She didn't have a good impression of the Star City duo, so she had never brought it with her. The headset was connected quickly. Welcome Barbara to our chat room. I won't talk to you for now, we still have business to do. Robin, continue. The voice in the headset was very clear. And Felicity could be heard hurriedly saying hello, and then they started their business again. She said a sentence in the headset, and Robin repeated it outside with a human loudspeaker. Barbara felt the scolding was so utterly nasty and vicious. If she were in his shoes, she'd have burst a blood vessel. She recalled how Thea's 2 insults had left her without dinner. Were the people of Star City so capable of cursing? There was no repetition in the insults. What a vast vocabulary that required. Robin, take a half-minute break. I'll find a new one. Have a drink too. Then she heard Felicity's keyboard tapping and a faint shout. You bald guy over there, pass me a bottle of water. What the hell? What new one? Barbara didn't realize there was a story here that she didn't know. She stared at Robin. If her girlfriend had looked at her like that in the past, she would have fainted from happiness. But now she was truly exhausted, gasping for air. She wanted water, but there was none. A layer of something unknown floated on the surface of the lake. Killer Croc had a strong digestive system, so he could drink it, but she couldn't. She licked her lips and tried to think of something to quench her thirst. I'm back again. Let's continue, Felicity said with great energy. Wait, interrupt me. What were you looking for? Barbara felt she wouldn't be able to sleep if she didn't get to the bottom of it. Have you seen 100 Classic Practical Curses, the 2007 latest edition? I've seen a few and always thought they were valuable collectibles. I didn't expect to use them today. Haha. Robin, let's continue. Felicity's speech veered off topic, but fortunately she remembered the main point and forced the conversation back. So you Star City people are so good at having fun. Barbara felt like she had wasted the previous 20 years of her life, silently watching Robin imitating her curses. It's true, this joke truly was a classic. Barbara initially caught a few particularly amusing lines and memorized them, intending to use them later. But then she realized every single one was a classic. With a gritted teeth and a stamp of her foot, she flipped on the recording device on her battlesuit and started recording. Killer Croc, in the center of the lake, was also feeling uneasy. At first, he ignored Robin's scolding, his only concern being getting those pesky guys out so he could get to shore and escape. This artificial lake wasn't built to national standards. He wondered how much money the contractor had embezzled. It was a pure lake, with only a single, muddy passageway beneath it, the same one he'd taken from the Chinese restaurant. There were definitely enemies lurking there now. He couldn't go back. He swam around the lake's bottom, finding no other escape routes. But he wasn't desperate. He was underwater, and they were above. He might as well wait it out. There was food and drink underwater, so who was afraid of whom? As he pondered this, he caught a small fish that swam by and devoured it in a few bites, sneerfully watching the people on shore. When Thea and Catwoman left, he felt a brief moment of joy, thinking the guys were retreating, but then he noticed the young man who'd tripped him earlier had returned to the lake's edge, his cheeks puffed out, and he started cursing. How foolish of them to use such a cheap trick to get him out. My body may have grown, but my mind remains sharp. I'm a famous detective. No, I'm just me. A firework of a different color. He casually caught another fish and slowly devoured it, watching Robin on the shore. Killer Croc didn't bother to join in the curses, so he just treated it as a stand-up comedy routine. But as he listened, it felt off. His curses were too harsh. In a short time, he'd already rattled off countless relatives' names. He'd already been tossing around his entire family, and now they were recounting stories from their grandfather's generation. Chapter 61 Mixed Doubles. Killer Croc wanted to join in the verbal abuse, but then he remembered being abandoned as a child, hiding in the sewers. Unlike the four little turtles next door, who had a grandfather in the form of a mouse as their financial support, the few words he could speak were a result of his intelligence and eagerness to learn, but his meager vocabulary couldn't compare to the guy on the shore. He decided to hold back. Fortunately, the target of his atavism was a crocodile, a reptile with inherently cold-bloodedness, meaning slower blood circulation and less prone to anger. Coupled with the damage done to Robin's brain by the mutation, her verbal abuse was a bit overly sophisticated, requiring a few detours to grasp the meaning. Killer Croc was still catching up on his old tropes when new ones emerged. Hey, Barbara, Thea and the others are about a minute away from entering the battlefield. We need to lure him out. I'll open a separate channel for you. Join in the verbal abuse, Felicity said hurriedly through the headset. Want to go up and verbalize too? Barbara found it hard to believe. Having received higher education her entire life, she'd never done anything like this before. She was a little hesitant. Could she possibly do it? But seeing Robin's face flushed with anger, it seemed like she was enjoying it. A strange feeling of guilt welled up in her. Was this the saying, 3 years to learn good things, 3 days to learn bad things? As a modern, educated woman, she couldn't afford to leave any regrets. She'd mastered both the housekeeping and the kitchen, and she'd also mastered the Trojans and climbed over the fence. She'd already accomplished both. To fight mistresses and hooligans in the future, to the point where she could barely take care of herself, she seemed to need to address this shortcoming. Today was a rare opportunity. No problem, let's go. I found a mixed-gender thread for you. It's called Make Your Opponent a New Human Being 07 trial version. It's said to be very effective. Let's try it out. I'll debug the channel first, while Robin explains the precautions to Barbara. Felicity, in her headset, was incredibly excited. She'd never been so cheerful in her life. What precautions are there? Can't I just yell at the top of my lungs? Barbara was puzzled. Robin, fearing she might stifle him, stood 3 meters away and said seriously, "Dear, there are a few things you need to pay attention to. First, inhale from your lower abdomen to channel the sound through your chest to your vocal cords. Don't release the sound all at once, develop it gradually. I'll show you." Without waiting for Barbara's reaction, Robin stood tall, chest out, and, like a singer practicing her voice, performed a few standard vocal movements with clear, melodious pronunciation. Feeling good about himself after the performance, he gave Barbara a thumbs up, his eyes brimming with encouragement, suggesting you try it yourself. Actually, Robin here was getting a little carried away. Though he'd been quiet in the past, that was all thanks to Batman. Bruce hadn't smiled since his parents died. Whenever you see him grinning from ear to ear, it's a sure sign he's been controlled by the Joker. Let's resume the Holy Grail War. No, the War of the Capes. Felicity's guidance today unleashed the normally suppressed passion of the young man. He felt a surge of energy, his body brimming with energy, the gloom of the past vanishing. Looking at her boyfriend, his face beaming with life and brimming with fighting spirit, Barbara couldn't help but wonder, is this still my Robin? My Robin wasn't this droll. Master Batman would be stunned to see his prized protege like this. I'm back. Everything's set up. Barbara, try and hear it. Can you hear it? Lovely. Then let's begin. Killer Croc, in the center of the lake, saw not only the young man scolding him, but also the woman beside him. Was he being scolded by both sexes? Humph, my blood circulation is slow, but I'm not angry. You think my crocodile skin is fake? I'm telling you, my skin is thick all over, but my face is especially strong. Relying on his exceptional talent, Killer Croc calmly listened in the lake, but soon realized that this time, unlike previous ones, the mixed men's and women's doubles team was surprisingly formidable. Perhaps because they were a couple, their voices meshed perfectly, and with Felicity's careful coordination, the two voices created a subtle harmony. Barbara felt a little uncomfortable at first, but she quickly capitalized on Robin's unique technique. Her high-pitched voice, combined with Robin's powerful voice, created a strange physical phenomenon, creating a blend of voices with far greater penetration. Their voices rippled across the lake. As the scolding wore on, Barbara completely abandoned her reserve, singing the hymns she'd learned in choir as a child. She occasionally gave Robin a smile and a wink, her voice shifting between holy and seductive, alternating with the tone of her master's voice. Robin looked at his lover with a face full of happiness. It was also the first time that he discovered the potential of his lover. He loved the tone of this saintly seductress and felt that no matter what her identity or profession was, she was the woman he loved the most. Their love affair completely angered Killer Croc in the center of the lake. As a cold-blooded humanoid creature who had been single for 30 years, he could no longer suppress his anger this time. You are too much? If you want to show off your affection, go home and show it. Why are you hurting me like this? He had forgotten the previous indifference to fame and fortune, watching the flowers bloom and fall in front of the courtyard. He had only one thought in his mind, he wanted to burn this pair of dogs to death. Killer Croc also forgot his original intention of hiding in the center of the lake. In order to increase his momentum and suppress their decadent voices, he shouted kill and rushed out of the center of the lake. This was a passage from an online novel he'd read in the sewers as a child. It was supposedly a translated version from a distant Eastern world. Whenever the protagonist was bullied or surrounded, he'd yell kill, and then surge with power, overwhelming his enemies. There was actually a line called break it, but he felt that power wasn't strong enough, so he gave up. As a child, he'd been bullied and beaten constantly because of his appearance, and yelling that word would always embolden him to fight back. Over time, many people started calling him Killer Croc, which wasn't a bad name, at least he thought. The two on the shore were feeling refreshed. Batman was missing, Gotham was in chaos, and all their worries had vanished. It felt like the sky was falling down, covering them all. If it weren't for the wrong timing, they'd almost had a fight with the sky as their blanket and the ground as their bed. Be careful, he's coming out. Felicity, controlling the drone, truly the best teammate of 2007, warned the two immediately. They then realized, they'd almost forgotten, there was another enemy in the lake. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 62: Material Pollution and Spiritual Pollution. Killer Croc, his face grimacing, ran to the shore and pounced on Robin, completely oblivious to Barbara, who appeared to be unbuckling her belt but was actually holding a whip. This is actually quite understandable. When a single dog sees a couple flaunting their love, their first instinct is to bite the male. They won't say, "You two are too incompatible together. I'll just bite the female to death and then live happily with the male." After all, the majority of single dogs are still male. Perhaps there are few females among them? The data is too sparse to be universal. Of course, this possibility isn't completely eliminated. There are still some single, gay people in life, and each of them is a rare breed. We should be compassionate and tolerant. This is definitely true love. It's like if we see a lecherous man stop a handsome couple on the street, slap the female in the face, and then, ignoring the surrounding gazes, run off with a handsome man. At this moment, don't pull out your phone and say, "Hello, is this 1100? At this moment, we can just silently send our best wishes. Seeing Killer Croc charging at him recklessly, Robin felt a surge of joy. This joy wasn't because he'd found true love, but rather because he was afraid he'd attack Barbara. Whether he could defeat him was another matter, but he didn't want this guy to overpower his sweet-smelling girlfriend. Even after soaking in the lake for a while, the pungent, sour smell still lingered on him. "Just wreak havoc on me alone," this was Robin's true inner reflection. His voice was hoarse from shouting. He'd finally lured him out this time, and he couldn't let him get away again. Signaling Barbara to cut him off, Robin moved the battle a few steps closer to shore. "Felicity, are they here yet?" Barbara watched as her boyfriend engaged in another brawl with a massive man. Robin wasn't in the best shape he'd been at the beginning. He'd stood in the sun, cursing for half an hour, without a break. Killer Croc made the water his own. With plenty of rest and the 2 fish he'd eaten, he'd already regained most of his strength. As one side gained strength while the other lost, Robin, now mentally exhausted, could only do his best to dodge his opponent's attacks, occasionally counterattacking with little effect. "Ah, we're here. If we all rush out, we'll scare him. We'll charge out at the crucial moment," Thea's voice boomed through the headset. She and Catwoman had been here for a while, but she'd stayed hidden nearby, feeling the combined power of their curses was formidable. Thea had her sights set on a single strike, her skateboard and bow ready. If Killer Croc showed a flaw, she'd show this science-illiterate man how refrigerator was made. Catwoman, for now, didn't mind. She simply enjoyed watching the action, having been a villain in her early years but recently turned a new leaf. With her calculated tactics, Killer Croc couldn't escape, so she watched with amusement from the bushes. She didn't mind, but Barbara couldn't. Seeing her boyfriend struggling, she swung her belt, actually a whip, and joined the fray. Thea was eager to see her skills, as they still needed some time to coordinate. But after watching, she wasn't disappointed, she felt it was a bit underrated. For some reason, Barbara had devoted considerable effort to her whip, clearly favoring this medium-range weapon. She constantly exploited her feminine agility to maneuver her footwork. This method of fighting was a bit tricky, though effective against ordinary enemies or minor monsters, and even quite effective and beautiful. A single swing of the whip could deal significant damage. However, this fighting style was vulnerable against even slightly stronger foes. If she were only at this level, Thea could defeat her without any weapons, and with a high success rate. The strongest of their group was Catwoman. Years of street fighting, her ambivalent style, had exponentially increased her combat prowess. Remember, she had received virtually no training, never attending a formal class like Thea had, and her skills were honed through real combat. Robin's strength was somewhat lacking. Batman placed too much importance on his successor, teaching him all his signature moves. However, Robin's slender frame meant many of his moves were impractical for him. Perhaps realizing this, he artificially focused his skills on agility, resulting in a somewhat unrefined appearance. Barbara, on the other hand, was a true sidekick. Without significant adjustments, her achievements would likely be limited. Just as Thea was contemplating the issue, Felicity's voice rang out again, "Don't just beat him up. Keep scolding him. What if he runs away?" "I'll keep reciting." Still scolding? The young couple glanced at each other, each catching a glimmer of anticipation in the other's eyes. "So be it." Felicity was reciting it, and they were repeating it, reflexive, without even thinking. They continued to scold and fight, unfazed. You bastard, you stink. You're polluting us physically, so we'll use trash talk to pollute you mentally. Come on. Let's hurt each other. Killer Croc was actually already feeling a bit tempted to run. While he didn't have Spider-Man's spider sense, his regressive appearance had heightened his sixth sense somewhat. Even though he only saw 2 enemies, a bad feeling still lingered in his stomach. Just as he was about to return to his fish, he noticed a couple continue their quarrel. Their chorus, like a song, ignited his surging anger. You guys are still going on, don't you understand the principle of giving people a break? Regardless of their limited vocabulary, they launched into a barrage of insults. Felicity, in her headset, also began to fire off her own jokes, focusing on crocodile-related stories. She'd already finished explaining the process of making crocodile leather bags and was now describing how to sauté crocodile meat for a more scientific and nutritious approach. Robin and the other 2 didn't have to think, their fighting abilities largely unaffected. But Killer Croc grew increasingly enraged as he listened. While he still considered himself human, the ostracism of human society over time had shaped his understanding of crocodiles. Robin's tale of skinning, cramping, and braised dishes was so jarring, she relaxed her attack on Barbara. She was actually nimble, leaping up and down like a rabbit. Killer Croc couldn't hide her, so he gave up and ignored Barbara, raining down punches on Robin. Robin, already exhausted, could only barely hold her own against this ferocious onslaught. Barbara couldn't bear to watch her boyfriend get eaten, but her power was limited. She swung her whip around Croc's legs, hoping to hold him back and buy Robin time to regroup. Chapter 63 Good Opportunity. Although Barbara's strength was smaller, barely even that of an average person, a level that wouldn't even be enough to offset Killer Croc's own weight, let alone pull him, Barbara's timing was ingenious, catching him just as his old strength was exhausted and new strength was yet to come. Killer Croc was chasing Robin when his right leg was suddenly entangled in the whip, halting his progress. Catwoman, who had been hiding for a long time, saw the opportunity her teammate had created and leaped into action without hesitation, unleashing 2 throwing knives straight at Killer Croc's unprotected eyes. She also unleashed her own whip and wrapped it around his left leg. This was the gift from the unromantic Batman on their date, and honestly, it was quite useful. Robin had been hit hard by Killer Croc's barrage of punches, and despite protecting his vital parts, he was still sore all over. The guy was too strong, and the protective suit only provided limited protection, so bruises were inevitable. Seeing his 2 teammates restraining the enemy, Robin didn't dare slack off. He knew they were working so hard to subdue Killer Croc, perhaps to save face in front of others. As the only man on the team, he couldn't afford to lose to Girl. With a misstep, he ran up behind Killer Croc and punched him in the back of the neck. His team's motto was no killing, and he had no intention of switching sides. Although he didn't understand how much a fellow like that could contribute to society, he still had to abide by the Batman's rules. Stunning the enemy was, in Robin's opinion, a perfect outcome. A normal person would indeed faint from a blow to the back of the neck. This scene is a common occurrence in movies and TV shows. The protagonist or antagonist tricks someone into a dark room, then, from behind, delivers a single blow, knocking the target unconscious. While there's some artistic flair involved, the principle is sound. Anyone familiar with a human body and trained in this technique could pull it off. Robin was certainly trained, and he was confident in his abilities. However, he didn't expect his confident, decisive punch to have an unexpected effect. Is Killer Croc a normal person? Emotionally, he considered himself quite normal. Rolling in the mud and catching a few small fish and shrimp for breakfast, wasn't that a normal life? He'd seen women smearing mud on their faces. They'd heard it was called seaweed mud. It was said to be quite expensive, but that was ridiculous. To him, the mud was no different from the mud in his own sewers. Another time, from a distance, he'd seen some short, yellow-skinned people from what he called Foot Basin country eating a raw fish, then celebrating with a song and dance. Why were they so happy? Couldn't they normally eat raw fish? That had to be it. Killer Croc felt these people were worse off than he was. Seeing how pitiful they were, he'd even thrown a few fish in their group, though he wondered if they'd eaten them. Through constant contact with human society, Killer Croc hadn't seen anything wrong with his lifestyle. Aside from his appearance, he was no different from them, and this only reinforced his belief that there was nothing wrong with him. But was it really so? Many in Arkham were crying out, "I'm not sick, I'm not crazy." The truth is, they were all mad. The more they cried out, the more serious and incurable their illness became. On the other hand, those who quietly pondered patrol patterns were the ones who weren't crazy. Killer Croc was one of those people who claimed to be human, but in reality, he was no longer. Physiologically, his genes were miles apart from humans. If he didn't halt his current rate of degeneration, he would theoretically become a humanoid crocodile who knew only killing in 20 years. Of course, all that was still a long way off. Regardless of what the future held, Killer Croc had to escape this crisis first. His legs were entangled by the two women, but Robin had already circled behind him, gathering all her strength and delivering a powerful punch to the back of his neck. The imagined enemy collapsed to the ground, receiving the women's adoring gazes, and finally marrying Barbara and reaching the pinnacle of life. None of that happened. Robin watched, dumbfounded, as Killer Croc writhed on the ground, clutching his head. The two women, trying to avoid being caught in the act, retracted their whips and watched from afar. He didn't look like he was going to faint. Had his martial arts skills declined so much that he could even miss such a simple blow? Robin's face was grim. Even uglier than his was Killer Croc. His bulk made his reaction time somewhat slow. He was a step too late to notice Robin circling behind him, so he didn't dodge the punch. A normal person would have fainted after being hit by Robin's punch, which was filled with Cosmo Chakra. They wouldn't have woken up for 3 days, or even if they did, they would have been starving. But Killer Croc was no longer normal. His anatomy had become much more similar to that of a crocodile with age. Below the neck, near the spine, a crocodile has a dense cluster of neurons that control balance and overall coordination. From the average person's perspective, the crocodile's barrel-shaped head, neck, and body wouldn't be able to locate the exact location, but a skilled hunter could spot this area. If you prefer to avoid the traditional tactic of burying a knife in the crocodile's path and leaving it to disembowel itself, and instead choose to challenge it like a warrior, you simply need to find this spot and stab it with a dagger. This will paralyze the crocodile, allowing you to kill or shave it as you wish. Unfortunately, Robin landed in this exact spot. If he had a knife, the fight would have been over by now, and the men would have carried their loot back to hand in their task. However, he struck unarmed. While powerful, crocodiles are notoriously thick-skinned, and the resulting blow caused more pain than stun. The intense pain overwhelmed even the shrewd Killer Croc, who, despite the intense nerves, rolled on the ground with his head in his hands, ignoring the surrounding enemies. Oh, what a perfect opportunity. Seeing the enemy rolling around, leaving several of his own men stunned, Thea knew it was her turn to make her move. Levitating 10 meters into the air, she controlled her skateboard and launched herself out like an arrow. Flying to a distance of 30 meters from Killer Croc, she sniffed gently, finding no unusual odor. She could have shot from 100 meters away, but to avoid appearing too special, the group of friends and family were all covered in various things. With the idea of solidarity in mind, Thea chose a relatively close range. Drawing a freezing arrow, she calculated the lead time, aimed at his calf, and released it with a whoosh. Facing these kind-hearted temporary teammates, she didn't want to cause any conflict by killing an enemy. Chapter 64, Reinforce It Again? Killer Croc was still tumbling on the ground. Though his crocodile reflexes warned him of danger, the pain was so intense he'd forgotten his own name. His brain hadn't even registered the danger signal, or if it had, it simply hadn't the brain cells to process it. Compared to the pain in his back, the slight arrow strike was barely a wound. He'd also spotted the person who'd shot him. He wondered, how could this person float in the air? As a single crocodile who'd lived in the sewers for 20 years, he'd never seen anything so high-end. Was this the airplane they'd been talking about? His subconscious thought it wasn't, as airplanes seemed to fly high. After a few random thoughts, he realized his back had surprisingly lessened. This was great news. As long as he could move again, he could run back to the lake. A flying creature couldn't possibly go underwater, could it? As for the three on the ground, Killer Croc figured he could still make it out despite a few hits. He also figured that if he went into the water, no matter what they said, he wouldn't come out. The plan seemed sound, and he was about to take a step back to charge back down the road. Why hadn't he moved? She tried to move, but found herself unable to move, and a piercing cold coursed through her. She instinctively looked down. Wow, how could I be frozen from the neck down? Her massive head swung from side to side, only her neck remaining. She looked around, and the surroundings remained the same as before. The couple from before, along with the guy who jumped out and thrown knives at her, were watching. Catwoman, who knew Thea best, was stunned. As they went back to retrieve their equipment, Thea briefly recounted her monster-killing routine, how she'd shoot an arrow from a distance, slowing down the enemy's movement speed. She'd assumed Thea was a skilled archer, someone who could point and shoot from 100 meters away, puncturing an enemy's leg and slowing them down. The rest of them would charge in, hacking the enemy beyond their wit's length, then scoop up the corpse and divide up the equipment. But that wasn't the case at all. Catwoman couldn't tell if her archery skills were impressive, but the scene that followed was terrifying. She could see the enemy being reduced to a giant icy mass. This is Killer Croc, naturally 2.2 meters tall with his head sticking out. If he were a bit shorter, he'd be completely frozen, right? Catwoman felt that the speed limit she'd come up with wasn't the same as this. He's practically an ice sculpture. Is this the standard in Star City? Judging by Killer Croc's appearance, let alone his speed, he could be in the operating room soon, a cheerful paraplegic. Barbara, what's that attached to her arrow? Robin had originally plopped down on the ground, panting with exhaustion, upon seeing the battle over. But when she saw Thea's frozen crocodile, she hurried over to Barbara to ask, perhaps from the cold or a bit of fear. It's probably some kind of chemical. I can't tell what it is, but it's pretty powerful. Barbara, after all, had received a formal education. Her vision and experience far surpassed Robin, who had always relied on self-study. After a moment of reflection, she offered her own answer. Do you think we could research this weapon? Robin was now quite fond of this unknown chemical. If you had come earlier, would I have been so exhausted? I'm afraid not. Mr. Bruce wouldn't let us use it. It's fine against enhanced persons, but our enemies are mostly ordinary people. Few would survive a single blow. Barbara was actually a little envious. This weapon was convenient and fast. No matter how powerful the enemy was, the 3 points of attack in a triangular formation would make it impossible for them to escape. Unfortunately, as long as Batman didn't change his principle of not killing, they would have to say goodbye to this weapon. They had to fight honestly. What if we develop it privately? This would be a great weapon for a killer. Robin still had some hope. Barbara sneered. Do you know how much it costs to develop this thing? Do you have a lab? Do you understand the expertise required? Are you planning to rely on just the two of us? She peppered Robin with questions, leaving him speechless. Yes, they didn't have a big conglomerate backing them, nor were they the illegitimate children of some noble family. They were just poor kids who grew up in a circus. Barbara was a beautiful, wealthy woman, but she was just average. He didn't know how much assets the Quinn Group had, but he figured even if it wasn't as good as Wayne Enterprises, the gap wouldn't be too big. He knew how Bruce's Batmobile and Batfighter were developed, and how much they cost. Thinking about those astronomical figures made Robin feel dizzy. He could only envy the world of the rich. He decided to go back, take a shower, and live a simple life with his wife in his arms. Thea, what do we do now? Just leave this guy here. Catwoman looked at the huge block of ice in front of her. Killer Croc already weighed 400 or 500 pounds, and now there was another block of solid ice on top. How many pounds would the total weight be? In the past, their strategy had been to find the enemy, knock him unconscious, and leave him hanging outside the police station. But now the station had been breached, and there was no way back for the time being. Besides, they couldn't take the enemy with them. The four of them were all incredibly small, and there were only 3 women and 1 man, with the only man drooping with exhaustion. How could they possibly move? Honestly, Thea hadn't really thought about this. Felicity hadn't offered any advice, so she decided to just stick to her own strategy. All of you get out of the way. I'll fire another arrow to reinforce him, and then we'll be done here. Thea pointed at Robin and Barbara, who were observing closely. You're not going to kill him, are you? He's practically frozen to death, Barbara said, pointing at the ice sculpture. Indeed, Killer Croc's once powerful head had lost the energy to move, its sallow eyes staring helplessly into the distance, its fangs making a clicking sound from time to time. It's okay, he won't die. Get out of the way. Thea was baffled by their inexplicable principles. If he died, he died. If you don't mention it, who would know? And even if they did, what would happen? This guy had degenerated to this point. Was he still a human in the traditional sense? Was he protected by the law? Did he pay into the Social Insurance and Housing Fund? Even if Batman jumped out right now, Thea would be able to silence him. Besides, Thea didn't think such a cold would kill him. Didn't you see Captain America, frozen for 70 years, still look full of life after thawing? He looked quite strong, too. Plus, Crocodile was naturally cold resistant, so he wouldn't freeze to death anytime soon. Of course. Some muscle atrophy and nerve paralysis were not within her consideration. Chapter 65, Minor Problems with Transportation. She'd previously aimed for her calf, but this time, she didn't need to aim. She hardly fired another arrow towards the upper part of the ice. It was all money, and she still hadn't found a fat sheep to reimburse her. She could only hope that Master Bruce would return soon. She really couldn't afford to spend it. The three members of Batman's family were unaware of her inner journey. They only saw a flash of white light, and Killer Croc, who had previously been vaguely visible in human form, vanished completely. An irregular block of ice, 3 meters high and 5 meters wide, hovered where the enemy should have been. Only a vague figure could be seen through the transparent surface of the ice. They all sighed, perhaps from the cold. After all, the two shots had absorbed all the surrounding heat. Liquid nitrogen could theoretically reach temperatures over -100 degrees Celsius. The chemical reaction would cause the airborne energy to dissipate, failing to reach the required threshold, but it could still maintain a temperature around -50 degrees Celsius. Alright, mission accomplished. I'm leaving now, Thea said to them with a relaxed expression, preparing to turn around and leave, fearing they would ask her to take them back. Taking Catwoman with him wasn't a problem. The two had already flown back and forth several times, and if Catwoman had suggested it, he wouldn't have objected. But Robin and Barbara were a bit of a dilemma. They'd been battling Killer Croc for quite some time, and the smell wasn't exactly pleasant. He could probably tolerate Barbara, considering they were sisters in the same class, and he could still take her back with him. But Robin's scent was unbearable. If they asked for help, it would be awkward whether he agreed or refused. So, without giving them a chance to speak, he decided to run. Get down first, we'll have a meeting to discuss this. Catwoman quickly grabbed her. Seeing she couldn't escape, Thea resigned herself to her skateboard and was dragged to an open area away from the ice to hold the meeting. Should we go further away? Will he hear? Robin asked, pointing to the ice that encased Killer Croc. Unaware of the situation, he focused on Thea. He's unconscious and can't hear us. Don't worry. Barbara didn't even wait for Thea to reply, quickly dismissing her boyfriend's silly question. Meanwhile, she thought to herself, your basic knowledge is so lacking. I'll definitely have to enroll him in adult education. If he can get a degree, it'll look good when we get married. Despite Barbara's abrupt ending, Thea nodded. Barbara's right. He should be unconscious right now. And with a thick layer of ice, he can't hear a thing. Robin felt a little embarrassed. He felt that since everyone else was a woman, he should have used more of his abilities, but his poor performance was counterproductive. He smiled sheepishly. Seeing him silent, the other women showed no interest in continuing. Although they discussed it, none of them had a good idea for dealing with the ice. The three members of the Bat family and friends unconsciously glanced at Thea. So this is your fault, so you have to get rid of it even if you cry. Thea was also a bit overwhelmed. She and Felicity had initially focused on power and duration, and at most, the cost. She hadn't considered how to deal with the consequences she had caused. Felicity, do you have any ideas? At times like these, she could only ask her friends for help. A silence fell through the headset. Let's go talk to Commissioner Gordon. At this critical moment, Catwoman finally offered a reasonable suggestion. In reality, she herself had no idea, which was a sign of actively shifting the blame. Everyone agreed it was a good idea, and they all jumped on it. Sayings like, an old person in the family is like a treasure, and we should leverage the initiative of our veterans, were all used to justify their own lack of ideas. Wait for me to get him. A busy tone rang through the headsets, and the four knew Felicity had gone to get help. But standing around was no solution for them. Miss Thea, are you interested in a demonstration? Barbara suggested enthusiastically. Their reactions varied. Catwoman was enjoying the show, Robin was a little worried about his girlfriend, and Thea was simply bored. She was ready to find a grassy area to sleep. Her recent routine had been one of sleeping during the day and fighting monsters at night. Having been forced into a Gotham team, her body clock hadn't adjusted yet. But seeing Barbara's confident expression, she didn't bother to engage in a conversation. Using weapons would be a surefire way to bully her. She dropped her bow and arrows and waved, "Come on." Seeing her discard her bow and arrows, both Barbara and Robin, prepared for a challenge, breathed a sigh of relief. There was no way around it. Thea's high-tech arrows were practically invincible against ordinary people. Even Lady Shiva would suffer a heavy loss if unprepared. After all, this was the age of technology, not martial arts. But Catwoman, a veteran of countless duels, saw her two teammates' expressions of relief when she discarded her weapons. She could only smile, indicating "I'll just watch and say nothing." Since the other party had given up such a powerful weapon, Barbara readily discarded her belt. No, the whip disguised as a belt. Thea hadn't been there during the initial fight, so she hadn't seen where she'd taken out the whip. So, seeing her opponent undo her belt was a complete shock, and she nearly yelled, "I surrender." She thought she was being a bit mysterious. "Why don't you wrap the whip anywhere else? Around your arm? Around your thigh? It's all fine, right? Tying it around your waist would easily create ambiguity when holding a weapon." Even a woman like me was startled. What if the opponent was a man? He'd been single for 50 years. As soon as you undo your belt, his original combat power of 5 would instantly transform into a werewolf, potentially over 100. The thought of it was dangerous, and I wanted to advise her, "Girl, have some self-respect. The adult world is still dangerous," but since they weren't close enough, she wouldn't listen even if she did, so I gave up. Realizing it was a false alarm, Thea's initial fatigue vanished. She'd been prepared to just deal with it and kill time, but since she was so determined, well, with her belt already untied, she could only oblige. They walked onto the ring, both unarmed, wary of each other, neither taking the initiative. Barbara gestured for Thea to attack first, which amused her a little. "You're already inferior to me, and yet you're giving me the initiative? I hope you don't lose too badly." "Pay attention," Thea warned, launching the attack. She used a Wing Chun sweeping hand to strike her opponent's face. Barbara employed a judo hand technique, attempting to grab her opponent's arm, setting up for the subsequent throw. Chapter 66, Discussion. But Thea also practiced judo, so how could she be caught so easily? Wing Chun is known for its tight defense. She thrust her arms outward, deflecting Barbara's arms and striking directly at her midsection. Though Barbara had never seen this style of boxing, she reacted quickly and switched to freestyle combat, unleashing a flurry of rapid-fire attacks to reverse the situation. However, the initial back-and-forth became a one-sided onslaught, seemingly intense, but in reality, she had no advantage. Within a minute of their exchange, Thea had already mastered her kung fu routine. It would be unfair to call her weak in close combat. It was obvious that she had put in a lot of hard work, but her repertoire was limited, revolving around a few moves from karate, judo, and freestyle combat, which were practically ineffective against ordinary fighters. But facing Thea, who could now hold her own against Ms. Shiva with her bare hands, presented a challenge. First, her techniques were flawed. They were at a disadvantage against a larger opponent. Like Killer Croc, using a throw like that would have been a horrible death, something Robin knew all too well. It was only because they were both women, with comparable strength and physique, that they were able to exchange blows for a few rounds. Second, she had very little experience in barehanded combat, wasting considerable energy. Perhaps whipping her previously didn't require such frequent movement, but now, facing Thea's powerful attacks, she could only frantically expend considerable energy dodging her close attacks and attempting to regain distance. Finally, and most crucially, she had never seen Wing Chun. Normally, Batman should know it, after all, he's said to know 127 martial arts. Perhaps Batman, with his enormous physique, dislikes this kind of close-quarters combat. Naturally, he doesn't usually use it. If he doesn't, Barbara has definitely never seen it. Furthermore, she's inexperienced in combat. She used to be able to hold out for at least 5 minutes, but now she barely lasts more than a minute. In the past, she would have been instantly defeated. Thea 1.0 wasn't one for modesty. Furthermore, this world's philosophy is to use your full strength. If you show mercy to your enemies, they'll punish you harshly. But the current situation is unique. They're playing away from home, facing a friendly force. Most importantly, the friendly's father is currently the leader of their own faction. Embarrassing her too much could easily damage their relationship. But he couldn't admit defeat, that would be too fake. He sighed inwardly at his opponent's weakness, thinking he hadn't used many of his moves yet. With no other choice, He abandoned his Wing Chun advantage and switched to karate, slowly and deliberately practicing. When Robin first saw his girlfriend losing, he was furious and wanted to stop, but he knew neither would listen, least of all the competitive Barbara. As he was trying to figure out how to resolve the fight without hurting his girlfriend's reputation, he suddenly noticed that Thea had changed her tactics. He had never seen Wing Chun before, but he felt the attack was fierce, powerful, and suffocating. If he had tried, he would probably be no match for the kicks. As for this move, he saw it clearly. It was karate. It seemed she wasn't very proficient in it. His initial hope for his girlfriend's victory resurfaced. Perhaps she could win? After all, if his wife was fighting, anyone would support her if she still wanted to live a good life. Thea didn't realize she was giving others the illusion of victory and counterattack. Honestly, she hadn't practiced karate much like Batman didn't practice Wing Chun. It wasn't that she couldn't do it, it just wasn't for her. Now, for the sake of acting and stalling time, she could only use her best moves. Others' best moves were ultimate, while hers was simply a lack of proficiency. Barbara didn't understand why she changed her moves when the odds were stacked against her, and she didn't dwell on it during the fight. She took a breath, refusing to rush this time, and began sparring with Thea with a stern expression. As the fight dragged on, Thea's inexperience gradually faded, and her formidable martial arts foundation emerged. She had been training with Ms. Shiva for months, the two of them fighting constantly. Sometimes, she thought Ms. Shiva was simply looking for a sparring partner and was using her as a distraction under the guise of training. Bruised faces and bruises were commonplace, but hard work paid off. Thea's combat skills had greatly improved. Despite some discord, her extensive combat experience had gradually helped her master rhythm, and the amount of exercise she now underwent was comparable to regular jogging. Barbara, on the other hand, was still lost in her delusion of victory, unleashing relentless attacks without a second thought about defense. But Thea's composed response drained her energy rapidly. Everyone on the field could see her problem: Thea wasn't fighting properly, just messing around. Robin saw it all and felt deeply anxious, but Catwoman didn't mind. She'd seen Barbara's decline long ago, and for a moment, she even thought Thea was giving them some face. With her rapid breathing, Barbara finally realized the difference between them. She was sweating profusely, while Thea, on the other hand, remained unfazed. Even a fool could see that she was holding back. She wanted to admit defeat, but the words wouldn't come out of her mouth. Since she couldn't concede, she could only stall for time. At that moment, she was filled with hope for Felicity. Hurry and find my dad, and we can stop this fight. She also wondered, where's my dad? They'd been fighting for nearly 10 minutes. Was he not at university? The anxiety of losing further weakened her spirit. The original 9 attacks and 1 defense became 9 defenses and 1 attack. Thea, already expecting her to concede or stall, decided against attacking. The two women engaged in a tacitly coordinated defensive battle, a scene barely worthy of description. It was like a fight between two vegetative bodies, slow and effortless, lacking both strength and speed. 10 minutes had passed in a flash. Catwoman, already tired of watching, had gone off to observe the ice. Only Robin continued to silently cheer his girlfriend on. His encouragement wasn't about "win, I'll marry you" or anything like that, but rather, "you must hold on." Barbara's stamina consumption was too high early on, and while it's been reduced, stamina is something you can't forget. A few masters of physical skill can maintain a balance between consumption and slow recovery, but Barbara isn't one of them. Just as she kept encouraging herself, insisting she couldn't give up, "Dad's almost here, right? Come on. Hurry back." Finally, she heard Felicity's voice in her headset. "Hey everyone, I've got the commissioner. Let's get started." The voice was a little hurried, and it was clear she'd traveled a long way to find Commissioner Gordon. Chapter 67: Catwoman's New Business. With Commissioner Gordon's arrival, the women's war naturally came to a halt. Barbara could, with relative decency, declare herself undefeated. Even though the reality of the situation was obvious to anyone with eyes, at least she saved face. She didn't have the energy to chat with her father, so she slumped down on the floor. Another minute of fighting would have been enough to defeat her. Though her family wasn't particularly religious, the only words that came to mind were "God bless you." She felt a supreme being watching over her from an unknown time and space. With his watchful eye, she could safely navigate this embarrassing contest. She had a vague feeling that perhaps she had something to do for him. Perhaps there was a mission for her. Thea didn't sense any divine mission, she felt it was just an act. She was about to shake Barbara's hand, exchange a fist pump, or say something like thank you. After every fight with Lady Shiva, despite their wounds, they'd always exchanged polite words. But now, seeing Barbara's usual ladylike posture transformed into a sprawling position, her vibrant red hair plastered to her body in wisps, as if washed, she abandoned this gesture of veiled courtesy that was actually mocking. "Hey, are you guys listening?" Felicity asked uncertainly through the headset, hearing no movement. The drones that had been circling overhead had already flown back after the battle with Killer Croc, so she had no idea the harmonious and enthusiastic friendly match had unfolded. Here, everyone's here. Usually, Barbara was the one who made the most of the appearances, but now she was exhausted. Catwoman and Thea showed no interest in speaking first, so in the end, it was Robin who had to respond. Felicity let out a non-committal "oh," then. "Shall we begin?" Gotham's version of the six-party talks officially convened. The meeting's theme couldn't be broad-brush issues like world peace. Instead, they were primarily discussing the sheltering and adoption of single crocodiles. As the boss, Thea couldn't speak first, so she hinted to her top henchman. Felicity immediately declared, "If you don't want this thing, you can bring it directly to Star City. We at Quinn Corporation have an applied science lab stocked with all sorts of chainsaws and drills, and I'm sure single crocodiles will love it there. Besides, we have 1,500 eager workers at home. With a nod from you, we can pull this thing away with nothing but human hauling, shoulder slings, log rollers, and ropes. It's no big deal, rest assured, Gothamites." Barbara, catching her breath, firmly objected to this impertinent request. "This creature eats and drinks from our Gotham, and he'll die on our land. If you have a particularly urgent need, we'll give you a bowl of soup afterward, as a token of our shared camaraderie. But simply taking him away is out of the question." Thea had no real solution to this response. The value of heroes in this world is that you fight your own monsters, and outsiders have no right to dictate what equipment they produce. Since they were so adamantly opposed, she could only let it go. She didn't have high hopes for this giant anyway. As for drawing blood for boosters, whether it worked or not, the consequences were obvious from his appearance alone. Barbara was pleased that Thea and the others had backed down. Honestly, she felt a little apprehensive when she refused. After all, she and the others hadn't been particularly helpful in this whole incident. Felicity had started the verbal fight, and the two of them were just repeating themselves. Any two people could do the job, maybe even two with louder voices. The decisive blow had nothing to do with them. While they'd made a mess of themselves, they hadn't truly made much of a difference. Now, hearing they'd tacitly acknowledged Gotham's claim to Killer Croc, he felt like a great victory, and his favorability towards them had slightly increased. "Dad, do you have any ideas?" Barbara no longer cared about the massive block of ice. As long as it stayed in Gotham, they'd throw it anywhere. She just wanted to go home for a good shower and a good night's sleep. Commissioner Gordon was initially at his wit's end. He was a cop, a lifelong one. His wife hadn't bothered him much, let alone other chores. Construction workers were clearly better at this kind of moving. But Felicity's mention of 1,500 people gave him a crude idea. "We had plenty of people in Gotham, so no problem. Just use human labor. With so many idle people in the school building, a few hundred could easily be called upon to carry it away." Having a solution was always better than nothing. Commissioner Gordon gathered over 100 people, with Thea maneuvering the skateboard overhead. The rest of the group worked with logs and ropes, finally hauling the massive block of ice from the lake to the main road. After much effort loading it onto a truck, an hour later, it was safely back at the university. "Mom, what's this?" Probably a Christmas present. The arrival of the massive block of ice at the school caused a bit of a stir. Many children, never having seen anything so bizarre, ran around, constantly questioning their families. The families offered wildly improvised explanations, like weapons of mass destruction or the commissioner treating everyone to shaved ice. No one realized there was a single crocodile hidden inside. Mission accomplished, the group disbanded. Thea and Barbara went back to bed, each in their own slumber, while Robin headed to the bathroom for a shower. Catwoman pulled Felicity into a corner and whispered, "Do you have any equipment that can authenticate artwork? What are you doing?" Felicity looked dazed, but she wasn't stupid at all. Catwoman laughed, "I'm going to borrow some artwork. Gotham's jewelry industry has been going through a downturn lately, and no one dares to wear jewelry when they go out. The art market is the hottest right now. Catwoman was envious of Thea's skateboard, but while she was relatively wealthy, it was expensive to occasionally help the poor. Even Bruce's wealth was irrelevant to her. After all, she was still locked in a battle with Talia for the Wayne naming rights. Seeing Talia charging into Gotham with her child in tow, she felt the name was becoming increasingly distant from her. Since changing her name from Selina Kyle to Selina Wayne would take time, she decided to make it on her own. With money, everything would be easier. She could then choose to buy it directly from Thea or have Bruce make it for her. It just so happened that the city was in a state of panic, with the wealthy in the upper city staying at home and no one daring to go out. Market demand suddenly became sluggish, and her previous jewelry and jade business was inevitably hit hard. This forced her to focus on the art market, which she had not previously been good at. Chapter 68, First Contact with the Sky Eye Society. Felicity, a former, lesser-known hacker, had only recently turned clean and didn't yet have the strong sense of justice she would later develop. While she knew Catwoman's actions weren't simply borrowing and were definitely illegal, weren't hackers supposed to be law-abiding? Why didn't you talk to Thea? Felicity couldn't help but ask. Why me? We're not that close, are we? You two seem to have a better relationship, right? Catwoman was now filled with admiration for the Star City duo. She felt they could pull off something truly remarkable, unlike Batman's research. Compared to Batman's planes and cannons, the woman's research was more suited to her. She looked at them with the same envy that Nobrita had looked at Jeriman, a mixture of envy and anticipation. She was also pondering Felicity's question. Why not talk to Thea, with whom she had a better relationship? She pondered for a moment. Maybe it's because she's a rich girl. I have a feeling she wouldn't approve of my actions. I think we're very similar. You should be able to help me. What did she mean? Felicity was speechless after hearing Catwoman's words. Did she mean she looked like a villain, or a poor person? Did you think Thea was a good person? You were fooled by her white flower costume. Catwoman's judgment was actually quite accurate. Because of her family, Thea was so cautious that she wouldn't trample on laws and regulations, at least not without a life-or-death situation. According to the game's categorization, she was at least a lawful faction, though whether she was lawful good or lawful neutral was unclear. Felicity didn't have that problem. She fed herself and her family, and she was incredibly adventurous, otherwise she wouldn't have volunteered to come to this hellhole. Okay, this is for you. I don't know the rest. He opened his tablet, connected it to a phone, and quickly operated it. Finally, he handed the phone to Catwoman and walked away briskly. Catwoman took her phone and found a single app called Art Identification 2.2. It was a simple program that scanned a work of art and determined its age and production process. Its database was vast, even including artifacts from Malaysia. While it couldn't directly verify authenticity, it was sufficient. Catwoman wasn't particular about the artwork, as long as the age matched, she was fine. Haha, Catwoman thought, thinking Felicity wasn't being honest. If you were a good person, who would bother preparing the software? It was obvious it had been written a long time ago, just unused. This was a huge help to her. Thinking of her career taking off, she stopped caring about Bruce's imprisonment. That evening, Robin and Barbara, the husband and wife team, rested up and went out to capture a criminal with a nickname, the Electrocutioner. It was said they still practiced the same craft passed down from their ancestors. It was unknown how many generations of electrocutioners there were. But Thea looked at this serious-faced middle-aged man and thought he was just some idiot hired by someone. He was completely idiotic. He carried an electric car battery, either hydrogen or lithium, with 2 wires running to a glove, and he electrocuted anyone he caught. He seemed impressive, and he was practically unstoppable against civilians. But the clever Commissioner Gordon had discovered 30 years ago that their technique had a fatal flaw: it was water-sensitive. You didn't even need to prepare anything. Just walk 3 meters away, open a bottle of Pulse and pour it on his face, and he'd be silenced. What a ridiculous technique. They didn't pursue innovation, clinging to tradition for 30 years, passing down this idiotic trick from generation to generation, and continuing to fight the Gotham Police Department despite repeated failures. It was clear this family was just nuts. Thea shook her head, turning away from the stern electrocutor. She was afraid she'd laugh and ruin her ladylike demeanor, so she lowered her head to finish her black sea basin cheeseburger. Just when she thought she'd just let things slide, waiting for Batman to return home, and finally retiring to the sidelines, where she could steal a fortune while no one was paying attention, Someone came to speak with her. Ms. Quinn, the commissioner would like you to come to the conference room, an officer, whose name Thea couldn't place, said. Oh, sure, what did he want? Thea was puzzled. Could it be Batman's return? But she quickly shook her head. He wouldn't come so soon. His injuries would take a whole day to heal. His spine was broken, so even if he came out, he wouldn't be able to recover that quickly. She pushed the door into the conference room and found that not everyone was there. Felicity, Robin, and Catwoman weren't there. Only Commissioner Gordon and Barbara were talking to a woman in black. Thea, let me introduce you. This is Leela Michaels, a senior investigator with the Advanced Meta-Human Research Group. She's here regarding Killer Croc, Commissioner Gordon said briefly. Oh, isn't this the ADOR? And this woman is Leela? The future wife of John Diggle. She noticed she wasn't wearing a wedding ring. Did that mean they weren't together yet? Thea studied her features. She was a character from Arrow, wasn't she? It was surprising to see their first encounter in Gotham. Nice to meet you, the two women shook hands gently. It was clear that Lyra was still a bit youthful at this point, unlike the unsatisfied middle-aged woman she would become. She could barely be considered a young woman. Lyra was also secretly observing the young woman before her. She had been ordered to retrieve Killer Croc, so running into Thea was pure accident. But after learning more about her past, she decided to get in touch with her again. Ms. Quinn, I just saw Killer Croc's frozen body. Can I ask, how many days will it take for him to thaw under natural conditions? Why this question? Thea turned to ask Commissioner Gordon. I'm going to bed. Did Felicity tell you? Commissioner Gordon shook his head helplessly. He really forgot to ask, and when he remembered he couldn't find anyone. Leela asked him a few questions just now, which made him clueless. When he heard that Thea was eating, he hurriedly called people over after getting Leela's consent. Thea slapped her forehead. This confused guy really brought shame to Star City. She coughed twice quickly. Ahem, theoretically, under normal temperature conditions, it will thaw in 3 days. This has nothing to do with the race of the object. Whether it is a giant or a dwarf, it will take 3 days. If consciousness needs to be restored, ordinary people need to restore nerve activity, and it will take 15 to 30 days to wake up. But I haven't drawn blood or studied this guy, so it's hard to say, but it will take at least 5 days. Hearing that Killer Croc would not jump out of the ice immediately. Director Gordon and Barbara were obviously relieved. Leela nodded with the demeanor of a general. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 69 Communication and Reporting. Lyra watched Thea chatter away, a hint of curiosity in her eyes. The eye had long been keeping an eye on Gotham and Batman. As a billionaire, Batman had always been a target for secret government organizations like theirs. A pure earthling, he possessed intelligence and means, coupled with wealth and resources. He was also a beneficiary of the existing system, making him a natural collaborator with government agencies. His abilities were evident in his technological prowess, and in his daily life, he was a normal person, unlike the uncontrollable mutants. Although several experts within the organization were deeply concerned about Batman's mental state, wondering why he hadn't gone insane yet, they implied he could go insane at any moment, leaving it to them to decide. Ultimately, after careful consideration, Amanda Waller, one of the organization's leaders, decided to maintain contact. With the news of Batman's disappearance and the chaos in Gotham, they felt they could offer some timely assistance, making some initial investment in their efforts to win him over. As for Killer Croc, he was merely a sidekick. If he was available, they would take him away. If he wasn't, it wouldn't affect the overall situation. However, while investigating Killer Croc's capture, they discovered another participant who had come to their aid. Naturally, Thea's name came to the attention of the AOGICE. Although she had concealed her identity effectively, a discerning investigator could still uncover her background. Furthermore, with a vast reach of a national organization like this, with its servers and databases freely accessible, Felicity might not have mastered the techniques, but hackers of lesser caliber could easily pull out 5 or 6 and easily uncover her true identity. When the intelligence reached Amanda, she was stunned. Batman was the only wealthy superhero these days, and yet another, a woman, had appeared. This, As a fellow woman, inadvertently resonated with her. She immediately upgraded the mission's priority and dispatched her assistant, Leela, to Gotham to gather the latest intelligence and initiate initial contact. Miss Quinn, could you show me the captured target? Leela had just shed her uniform and entered the government office. Her demeanor was still more stern than gentle, and those who didn't know her might have thought she was putting on airs. Of course, and you can call me Thea. Actually, the mention of the target was just an excuse, simply to clear the room and find a place where they could talk smoothly. Commissioner Gordon, a seasoned veteran, understood what she was saying. He grabbed Barbara, who was trying to get closer, said hello, and disappeared. I heard Commissioner Gordon say it was your idea to encourage civilians to join the war. What were your thoughts? Don't you think it would kill a lot of civilians? Leela's words were blunt, almost interrogative. But Thea understood her soldiering nature. The military valued unity and unity. Everyone was a participant in war. It wasn't the general's job to fight, leaving the soldiers with nothing to do. Heroism is a cardinal sin in the military. Don't you see how impressive Captain America is? He can only lead a small team, carrying out bombings and assassinations, and was only promoted to captain after his suspected death. Sacrifices will certainly occur, but necessary sacrifices will save more lives and restore order to the city sooner. I think it's worth it. Thea hesitated before finally revealing part of her true feelings. The unspoken part was that these people are hell-bent on giving me a damn. There may still be good people in this city, but they're truly few. Let's get this over with as soon as possible. Her answer didn't surprise Leela. On the contrary, it resonated with her. As a government official, she disliked superheroes because they relied on their power and generally ignored the government. The docile ones would just agree with a few words, but the nasty ones would be ignored. What if Batman doesn't approve of this approach after he returns? Leela's question was more pointed. After all, Thea was an outsider. Batman was integral to everything Gotham did. Now that Tiger was away, you could do whatever you wanted. What about when he returned? Thea hadn't really considered this question. Her original intention was to retreat as soon as the Master returned. No matter how devastating the flood or how many people died, it was none of her business. With Batman watching constantly, how could there be fewer deaths? The city's policies needed to change, or the death rate would remain high. But saying it directly made Batman seem reckless and Gordon seem unintelligent, so Thea wanted to maintain a humble and cautious appearance. If we achieve results, I think he won't object. If nothing major happens, the unrest in the city will be quelled in a month. If it's not quelled, it's none of my business. Thea planned to retreat once the battle was almost over. She had already instructed Felicity to focus on a few wealthy fugitives, like the Penguin, and wait until they were isolated. As they walked, they chatted, occasionally exchanging opinions on the current situation. Lyra had come to contact her on a mission, and Thea knew she had a future as a leader of the Eye. Add to that her relationship with Digger, and Digger's close friendship with Oliver, and they weren't outsiders. As the two chatted, their relationship grew closer. Thea told a few jokes from her previous life, adapted to the local conditions, which made her laugh. Leela also talked about her military life. When she mentioned missiles, Thea listened attentively, increasingly convinced that missiles were difficult to develop. The military's management was too strict. Was she going to be stuck with bows and arrows? Before leaving, Leela said she would stay in Gotham for a while and hope to talk again sometime. Leela slowly stepped into the car, her demeanor changing from relaxed to serious, and connected the remote connection. Amanda, initial contact with the target has been made. It's better than we expected. Oh, tell me more about it. Amanda, the black woman in the camera, showed a hint of curiosity. From the conversation, I can tell that she is very mature and thoughtful. What I find most interesting is that her stance is almost anti-heroic. She opposes personal heroism, and she even encouraged the citizens of Gotham to stand up against the mob. I don't know if you have seen the picture I sent you. They have already set up a cordon in the city. As Leela spoke, the serious expression on her face disappeared, replaced by a bit of teasing. If Batman comes back, he will definitely have a good look on his face when he sees this scene. Amanda didn't say much, just nodded slightly, and she changed the subject. What is Killer Croc trapped in? Do you know? The accompanying experts said it was liquid nitrogen. I didn't expect her to be able to use this thing as a weapon. To be honest, several of our experts are very impressed. The experts were more than just impressed. They had already written a report to their superiors to apply. In the future, Each person going out on field missions should carry a few rounds. This thing is safe and environmentally friendly and perfect for dealing with flesh and blood enemies. Chapter 70 Attack. Thea wasn't surprised to find herself on the radar of the Eye Society. It was inevitable. She was useful to them, and they could help her in return. Whether it was her mother's campaign or her own technological weapons, both required vast connections. To put it more pragmatically, running for office as a heroic mother was like handing over hostages. As long as her mother remained in government, she couldn't do anything antisocial. Meanwhile, her heroic actions would in turn earn her mother's respect, at least in the eyes of the nation's top brass. After pondering her words, she realized she hadn't made any mistakes, and nothing had been overlooked. She felt relieved and went to chat with Felicity. "Hey, Felicity, have you seen Catwoman these days?" 3 days had passed since Lyra had transported Killer Croc. Thea participated in a monster hunt organized by Barbara. The process was uneventful. She used her entangled arrows to capture 15 lunatics who had escaped from the asylum. Actually, these lunatics were quite cheerful, each fearlessly charging onto the spider web, practically asking for their lives. After the mission, Thea was bored again. Going out alone felt awkward, so she wanted to find some company. Felicity was helpless, and the city was too dangerous for her. So she thought of Catwoman, but after searching, she found she was nowhere to be found. No one had seen her in the last few days, which led to the question. Haha, Catwoman? I don't know where she is either, Felicity mumbled, shaking her head repeatedly to emphasize her truth. Huh? Something's wrong. Thea said nothing, just staring into her eyes. Felicity was apprehensive, her eyes darting around, mumbling something, but she wouldn't reveal Catwoman's whereabouts. She was quite the loyal fellow. Thea didn't bother to press her. After all, these two couldn't possibly be secretly joining Bane. The world might be changing rapidly, but not this fast. Come on, let's go to your room for a drink. Seeing she didn't press any further, Felicity breathed a sigh of relief. Drink? Who's afraid of who? Come on. The two of them went to Felicity's house with a few bottles of Gotham beer. When they arrived in Gotham, Thea realized that this guy had a lot of games installed on his laptop. Judging from the installation date, it was from the time when the two of them were going to Gotham to prepare their equipment. This kid is really not afraid. Do you think he's here for tourism? In fact, the two of them are here for tourism. They are not the ones who rush to the front to fight for their lives. Commissioner Gordon was busy every day and had gradually recaptured 1/3 of the city. With more and more police officers and ordinary people participating, the speed of city recovery was snowballing. It was believed that this incident would be completely resolved in less than a month. The two of them were very bored. Thea wanted to practice martial arts, but when she found the specific person, she found that she was already invincible in this small part of Gotham. Barbara avoided her whenever she saw her. Catwoman's whereabouts were unknown, and Robin, adhering to the sex rule of not fighting women, refused to engage, no matter how much she was told. This left Thea with nothing but games and drinking. She was actually feeling miserable, too. Perhaps they played half the night, drunkenly falling asleep. Kill them all, kill them all. Is it painful? Is it scary? Save me. Dear, who was speaking? What was I doing? Thea could sense figures constantly passing by, some familiar, some unfamiliar, some seemingly friends from a past life. As she struggled to recall, 2 more figures, covered in blood, passed by. Mother and Malcolm? How could they be here? This was so wrong. What had happened to her? She shook her head vigorously, and her mother and Malcolm's figures transformed into old Robert and Oliver, their faces also covered in blood. Their bodies were swollen, as if they had been submerged in water for a long time. How could Oliver be here? He can't be here. This is ridiculous. I haven't even gone looking for him yet, and he's here on his own. What a joke. Thea finally realized something was wrong. She tried to calm herself and refocus her thoughts using the breathing techniques Ms. Shiva had taught her, but with little success. This confused her again. It didn't seem like she was the problem. Even with her eyes closed, she could still feel something drifting past her. Was I seeing a ghost? Where was I? I think I was in Gotham. What was I doing in Gotham? She tried to recall it, and as her memory slowly returned, her body regained some movement. Thea stumbled to her feet, taking in her surroundings and the woman on the ground. Her focus was a little hazy, and she stared for a long moment. Was this woman Felicity? Was she in trouble too? A pungent odor filled her nose, a mix of musk and some chemical, but Thea didn't have time to care. She felt her hallucinations surge as she inhaled the pungent gas. It felt like a war between tiny figures in her mind, and she was completely dazed. But she subconsciously knew she couldn't stay here for long. The more she absorbed the gas, the more intense the hallucinations would become. She opened her backpack and, not bothering to change clothes, strapped all her gear to her back. She strapped Felicity to one side of her skateboard and slowly climbed to the other. She secured her position and silently chanted, "Fly high." The skateboard shot out of the room like an arrow, hovering silently 300 meters above the ground. It seemed the mysterious gas's effect was concentrated on the ground. A cool breeze from high above slowly brought Thea back to consciousness. She found herself in complete darkness, with no moon in sight. Only a thick, dark cloud loomed over the landscape. Was it already night? Unnoticed, Thea quickly steered her skateboard away from the area. Once the smell of the gas had completely faded, she lowered her altitude, found a house, and entered without knocking. After looking around the house, she found it was empty. She found some cold water and washed her face, secretly feeling lucky. She didn't know if anyone else had been in trouble, but she knew she had barely escaped. Turning her head to take care of Felicity, the girl was lying on the skateboard, sweating profusely, as if she was having a nightmare, and she kept mumbling things like "don't go." Thea took a towel dipped in cold water and wiped her face, but after 2 minutes, she felt like the skin on her face was about to break, and she didn't wake up. Looking at her red face, it wasn't a girl's blush, it was simply the capillaries that had been ruptured by her rubbing. Thea was a little embarrassed. It seemed that this poison gas was quite advanced. The traditional method of pouring cold water didn't work. Was she the only one who could find a special antidote? After stretching her body, although she was not in her best condition, she had recovered about 70% to 80%. She had to go back. Whether it was to find an antidote or to save her companions, she had to make this trip. This time she had more time, so she changed her clothes, put on her hooded glasses, and carried a bow and arrow. In order to prevent the damn gas, she also wore a 3-layer large mask. She didn't know if it was effective or if it would come into contact with the skin, but she covered herself tightly, opened the door, and jumped onto the skateboard. Chapter 71 Rescue. The cold night wind pierced Thea's exposed skin like a knife, causing a dull pain. But she couldn't focus on that now. She still hadn't figured out who was behind tonight's events. Could they find an antidote to save Felicity? Were Batman's teammates also trapped on campus? Where was Commissioner Gordon? So many questions converged, causing her beautiful brows to furrow, and she fiercely vowed to bring down whoever had instigated this. Returning to the sky above the campus, the faint moonlight revealed a pale green gas blanketing the area. The place, bustling only a few days ago, now felt dead silent and gloomy. Lowering her altitude, Thea observed more closely. In the dim light, she could see several burly men patrolling the compound, automatic weapons in hand. They seemed to be wearing gas masks. That means the gas is transmitted through the respiratory system. Thea memorized their movements and prepared to grab 2 of them before retreating. The skateboard passed silently over the heads of several people, unnoticed by the patrolling soldiers. Many people have this problem. Normal vision is limited to a 120-degree angle of view. Those without the Byakugan Sharingan wouldn't bother looking above their heads. Thea, taking advantage of the darkness and strutting over the heads of several people, had a similar effect. Thea didn't waste time on the perimeter, heading straight for the brightest room. This time, she was careful, controlling the skateboard gently, hovering close to the ground, into what appeared to be a lecture hall. Instantly, Thea spotted Commissioner Gordon, with his gray hair and khaki coat, at the front. Beside him, the red-haired figure, who looked like Barbara, lay unconscious, tied to chairs back to back. Perhaps unaware of the escape and return, the security was lax. Only 2 men sat, one to the south and one to the north. The guard closest to Thea was swearing and muttering, while the one further away was dozing off. Looking around, Thea saw no signs of an ambush, so she decided not to act rashly. She slowly exited the room, preparing to find the others first and then join the rescue effort. Soon after, she spotted Robin in the crowd. He had lost his usual spirit, sprawled across the grass with a group of other citizens. Though sound asleep, a flicker of fear flickered across his face. After circling the camp for a while longer, Thea wondered where Catwoman had gone. Was she not at the camp? Hoping for good luck, she counted the people. Catwoman's absence was just the right amount of weight. Gordon, his daughter, Robin, and herself, 4 people barely fit under the skateboard's weight limit. Adding another person, it was doubtful whether the skateboard could fly. Just as she was about to return to rescue Gordon and his daughter and then emerge to retrieve Robin, she spotted an unexpected figure in the crowd. Layla? Why was she there? The appearance of Leela puts Thea in a dilemma. She also needs to be rescued, but having one more target doesn't mean that all the skateboards can be taken away. She can only give up one and take away the remaining 3. Who should she choose? Thea feels that it is a bit difficult to make a choice. Normally, they are all acquaintances, and she needs to rescue them all, but the reality is cruel. She can only choose to give up someone. There are no guards around Leela and Robin. It must be because they are both wearing casual clothes and are not noticeable. They are placed in the crowd as ordinary citizens. These 2 people can be said to be the easiest to rescue. What if she transports them out first and then comes back? This idea is very tempting, but Thea quickly gave up this idea. She came in once without being discovered and came in twice without being discovered. It is impossible for her to be so lucky every time. She was just relying on the cover of night, not invisible. This brings us back to the original question, who to give up? Commissioner Gordon, currently a golden calf, must be rescued. While his combat power is limited, his position as commissioner is crucial. His presence can mobilize the remaining police forces in the city. He'd already recaptured a third of the city as planned, but many officers were dispersed and not concentrated on the campus. With just a flag, he could quickly rally a significant number of officers to assist. Next up was Layla, Amanda's deputy and future leader of the Eye Society. He saw need to rescue her. Like the old commissioner, she was someone with limited combat power but strong influence. Through her, he could gain significant support from the Eye Society, which was crucial for him, as he struggled to find the mastermind. Furthermore, he didn't want to offend Amanda, a black woman with dark hair, dark eyes, and not too dark skin. She was ruthless and powerful, and if he wanted to stay in the organization, he'd have to curry favor with her. Saving her deputy would certainly be a significant accomplishment. Who would get the remaining spot? Despite her deep dislike for Barbara, Thea decided to give up on Robin. After all, a single girl with a decent appearance would be too dangerous in such an environment. Foreigners might not mind sex, but with so many perverts in Gotham, who knew what might happen? Robin, with his thick eyebrows, large eyes, and thin build, honestly, his appearance, figure, knowledge, and conversation didn't fit the local aesthetic. Barbara's interest in him was truly a blessing in disguise. Surely no perverted homosexual would be interested in him. She hoped he could keep his sex, even if he couldn't, it wouldn't be a big loss. She silently wished Robin well in the distance. Take care. It's not that I don't want to save you, it's just that there's no room on the bus. As the patrolling guards walked away, Thea quickly tied Lyra to the side of her skateboard and headed back to rescue Gordon and his daughter. Back in the lecture hall, the 2 guards remained in their positions. Thea dismounted and, using the stealth techniques she'd learned from the League of Assassins, she slowly approached the 2 men. Their walkie-talkies were close at hand, and if she couldn't incapacitate them immediately, she'd be exposed. She thought twice and gave up the idea of slashing their necks. Firstly, she feared getting covered in blood, and secondly, her stealth wasn't that impressive, it merely exploited the visual differences between light and darkness, not invisibility. She couldn't possibly approach the enemy unnoticed. Thea paced her dark corner, found the right angle, and instead of using high-tech arrows, she pulled out a tranquilizer-tipped arrow, each one containing enough to stun an elephant. She aimed at the guard, whose back was to her, still chattering. The arrow whizzed by, and the guard felt a chill on his neck. Without a word, he slowly fell to the ground. Before he fell asleep, he caught sight of a blurry figure behind him. He tried to warn his companions, but his mouth had completely lost control. His fall startled a dozing guard nearby. Before he could comprehend what was happening, he saw a flash of white light grow in his pupils. Despite his desperate attempts to dodge, the arrow struck him in the shoulder. A tingling sensation washed over him, and he lost consciousness. Chapter 72 Rescue, Part 2. After knocking out the guards with 2 arrows, Thea immediately approached them and ripped off the gas masks. After just a few moments of contact, she could already feel the effects of the gas again, and now she could only exert about 60% of her full strength. She picked up the gas masks and examined them. Although she knew they would protect her from the gas, the thought of them being ripped from their faces made her feel a little disgusted. She decided to make a quick decision and decided not to wear them. She stuffed the 2 masks into her backpack and took them back for testing to see if they could find the composition of the gas. Unable to linger here for long, Thea approached the chairs where Gordon and his daughter sat, feeling a bit apprehensive. The group seemed to recognize him as an important figure. They had bound the old director and Barbara tightly with a large iron chain and a lock. Her weak arms and legs couldn't free them, and she searched the 2 guards but couldn't find a key. Time was running out, and Thea didn't know if there were any surveillance cameras in the room. She controlled her skateboard to float over and pull out a chain from the outside. This device was originally used for emergency rescue operations, and its built-in chain could hold up to 500 kilograms. Mentally apologizing to the old director, he used the skateboard's built-in chains to wrap around the chair twice more, connecting them to the existing chains. The tangled arrangement of the chains added to the artistic beauty, resembling a zongzi from a distance. He controlled the skateboard, pulling Gordon and his daughter slowly toward the door, Thea pushing from behind. The skateboard was too small, and with Lyra already tied up, there was no room for them. Looking back at the glorious deeds of Indian brother, there's no room on the bus, so you two should just take the hanging tickets. You're all unconscious anyway, so you probably won't care. The door frame was too low. He could float out with a skateboard flat on the ground, but not with these people. He didn't want to make a big noise, so it was best to come quietly and leave quietly. Maybe there would still be a chance to save Robin. But Murphy's Law is so unpredictable. When you hope to do something without being discovered, countless onlookers will inevitably appear in a moment. Hurry up, everyone. Someone's breaking in. Thea hadn't even reached the door when she heard the footsteps of at least 10 people. Apparently, there were surveillance cameras here, otherwise she wouldn't have been so fast. Without hesitation, she leaped onto her skateboard, unconcerned about whether Gordon and his daughter would be hurt, and sped out the door at full speed. The less than 30 meters of distance were filled with clatter, thud, and bang. Like a Mongol noble executing a prisoner, Thea dragged the 2 men along like dead dogs, recklessly dashing out the door. Under the astonished gazes of the guards who had arrived, she soared into the air with a whoosh. From below, bursts of gunfire echoed. By then, Thea had reached a height of 300 meters. She could certainly continue climbing. With her fear of death and the performance of her skateboard, she could reach 500 meters. But she was worried the 2 people sitting on the ticket wouldn't be able to hold on. She had load-bearing suits, but they didn't. Glancing sideways at Layla, the young woman seemed uncomfortable. Shifting occasionally. She'd been kind enough to Amanda, and even for her deputy, this was first-class treatment. Compared to the 2 below, it was beyond description. The Gordons were covered in blood. Initially startled, Thea realized it wasn't the high-altitude pressure. Barbara had a massive swelling on her forehead, and one of Commissioner Gordon's shoes had fallen off, revealing a half-new, half-worn sock. This was the plight of a single, elderly man. Thea thought to herself, you didn't even bother buying him a pair of socks? You're hanging out with Robin all day. It's pitiful how much old Gordon raised you. After dodging a rocket, Thea realized she couldn't save Robin. Searchlights were set up below. A quick glance revealed a group of 30 or 40, all armed. However, they had no experience in anti-aircraft warfare, so they could only fire their rifles into the air. Thea sighed. They couldn't get up, and she couldn't get down either. As for Robin, she could only hope he'd survive and hold on until she and the others could rescue him. Returning to their temporary residence, they found Felicity still unconscious. The antidote seemed elusive. Just as Thea was about to charge back and capture someone alive to question her, Lyra slowly regained consciousness. Who are you? What's your purpose? I won't tell you anything, Lyra muttered haltingly, struggling to stand, but failing several times. Amazing. This was the first person besides her to regain consciousness on their own. Did this mean the poison could recover on its own without an antidote? Her awakening was probably due to her training as an agent, drinking coffee and anesthetics daily, raising her resistance to the poison to inhuman levels. How did she manage to wake up? Was it through sheer willpower and sheer stamina? Thea wasn't sure, but she still grabbed Leela's shoulders. Look carefully, I'm Thea Quinn. We met 2 days ago. You were attacked by poison gas, and this is the temporary room I found. Leela couldn't tell if she'd heard clearly, but she could see her adjusting her focus, trying to see the person's face clearly. Waking up would be easy, but she was worried about not being able to wake up. Thea didn't have any potions on hand, and even if she did, she wouldn't dare use them. She could only use the old method, a basin of cold water and a towel to wipe her face. Perhaps Thea had never taken care of anyone, or Leela wasn't used to this passive approach. She weakly pushed Thea away, took a breath, and dove into the basin of water. Her movements were clean and precise, and she truly possessed the bearing of a female soldier. If it weren't for the wrong timing, Thea would have applauded her. She exuded a heroic air, a stark contrast to the middle-aged, unsatisfied, sallow-faced woman she would later become. Time truly was a killer. With a swish, Leela jerked her head up, wiped the water from her face, and glared fiercely at Thea. It took a moment for her brain to register that the person before her wasn't an enemy. "Are you Thea? Where am I? Where are the others? Where are my men?" Although she recognized the person, she wasn't sure if there was a conspiracy, and remained vigilant, her entire body poised for attack. Apparently, she hadn't heard what she had just said. Thea sighed and recounted the events. "Here's what happened. There are only a few people here now, all unconscious. You and I are the only ones awake. I didn't see your men when I pulled you back, and of course, I wouldn't have recognized them even if I had." Chapter 73 Rescue, Part 3. Leela didn't have the energy to care about her joke. Despite seeing double, she still managed to stand up, steadfastly holding onto the wall as she surveyed her surroundings. It was a simple, ordinary house, its furniture worn, and a few scattered items scattered across the floor. Perhaps the owner had left in a hurry, but Leela observed it for a moment and realized it looked truly ordinary, not like a place to hold prisoners. The pitch-black night outside the window also confirmed that this wasn't a prison cell, and her previous worries were mostly put to rest. "If you can still walk, come with me outside to check. They're all unconscious and I can't help them." Thea said these few words, exhausted. She had been in the gas zone twice in a row, both times involving intense fighting and killing. The amount of energy she consumed per unit time was much higher than the unconscious women. She was barely holding on thanks to her immense willpower. Leela naturally noticed her pale face and profuse sweating, and she silently endured her own discomfort. As a former soldier, now senior agent, she couldn't say she was as weak as a noodle. If she were outdone by a 16-year-old girl, she would be ashamed of all those days of drinking an aesthetic like coffee. But she didn't have the energy to speak. She simply nodded, leaning against the wall and following Thea to the next bedroom. This room had a similar layout to the one she'd just been in, only larger. Inside, a woman lay on the bed. Leela had never met Felicity in person before, only a photo of her attached to Thea's profile. At first, she didn't recognize the woman with her glasses off and a red face, but she quickly realized it was Thea's partner. As for her name, her head was spinning and she couldn't remember it. The other two in the room weren't treated so well. They were both dressed in rags and bruised. Seeing their miserable state, Leela unconsciously touched her face. Could I be in the same situation? Though she was plain-looking, she had no intention of disfigurement. After a brief inspection, finding nothing unusual, she finally felt relieved and began to examine the two men carefully. Of the two, Leela instantly recognized Commissioner Gordon. His attire was so unfashionable, the same beige coat he'd worn for decades. Despite the bumpy ride, his signature glasses still sat securely on his face. In the 21st century, there was only one person in Gotham with such distinctive style and a strikingly stylish wardrobe. Leela's vision shifted, with phantom figures appearing, family members and former comrades. She knew it was only an illusion. She shook her head, blurry, watching the two men tied together, wondering to herself, the red-haired woman beside the commissioner must be his daughter. He couldn't possibly have been caught and tied up while meeting his lover. "Do you have any way to wake them?" Thea asked hurriedly, seeing her enter the room and remain silent for a while. "What could I do?" Leela gave up trying to hold on, leaning against the wall and slowly sitting on the floor. She'd once been a private, and now her job was more administrative. She had no idea how to answer such a technical question. Besides, her mind was slipping between lucidity and confusion. Even if she knew, she couldn't recall. "There's nothing I can do." "Hey, that's not right. Did you wake me up?" "No, you woke up on your own." Thea stopped shaking her head, becoming increasingly dizzy. She waved at Leela. "Although I do many good deeds and never leave my name behind, this one wasn't my doing." "Who knows how you woke up, then how did you wake up?" Leela was now determined to get to the bottom of things. Thea vaguely felt that her powerful mental strength had played a role, along with her improved physical condition. After all, this year of hard training was no sham. The combined effects of her body and mind had prevented her from completely passing out due to the poison that would have rendered an ordinary person unconscious. But explaining was too much of a hassle, so she could only continue to say she didn't know. The two of them couldn't come up with any practical solution to the problem at hand. Seeing the others dazed and disoriented, Thea looked frustrated. Since neither of them had any ideas, they could ask for help from outsiders. While Thea didn't know many, Leela was a high-ranking figure in the government organization. Can you find some help? Even without asking Leela, she'd already figured it out. She'd shed her honorary uniform, joined the Secret Service, and worked her way up the ladder. Why? Wasn't it also they could help her in this crucial moment? While the organization was known for abandoning people when they could, and their empathy was practically nonsensical, she was still the leader's deputy, a high-ranking member. If someone of her rank couldn't help, they should just disband. She didn't hide it from Thea. She pulled out her phone and began exchanging coded commands, mission names, and other alphanumeric phrases with a contact on the other end. The code changed every day, so she wasn't worried about Thea hearing any secrets. Being an agent wasn't easy, especially for someone like her. Every morning, she received the day's contact orders, spending half a day memorizing them, then forgetting them by the evening because they were replaced the next day. If you misheard even one letter, it could be a real bummer. Thea, of course, didn't bother listening to her code. To avoid suspicion, she walked to the window and opened it, letting the night air in. With 5 people in such a small room, Thea and Lila were sweating profusely. Gordon and his daughter were also covered in dirt and blood, and the smell was unbearable. Amanda, I'm in trouble. I can't move. Search for my location and send someone here. Though the voice was a bit far away, Thea's voice still reached her ears. Was she contacting Amanda? It seemed they had a good relationship. After all, not everyone could just go to the top brass when they were in trouble. Hopefully, the ones sent were elite. The call ended a short while later. My people will be here soon, just hold on a little longer, Leela said, her confidence in the organization's search capabilities growing stronger. She relaxed a bit, and it wasn't clear if she was trying to comfort Thea or to encourage herself. Reinforcements arrived quickly. 4 agents in black suits and sunglasses quickly found the place. The leader presented their credentials first. Leela checked them, then instructed them to transport the people inside the house first, so she could still leave. The agents obeyed orders and followed their instructions. Felicity was easy to deal with. She wrapped the person in a sheet and threw him into the car like a dead pig. Go. Chapter 74 Rescue, Part 4. As they prepared to transport Gordon and his daughter, they encountered a minor problem. The gang members, knowing they were important individuals, had tied them up tightly from the start. Then, Thea twirled them twice, tangling them in a chaotic manner. Finally, the chains jostled and tangled during the airlift, leaving them like a ball of string, a knot so dense it was impossible to trace. Unaware of the situation, the agents expressed surprise at the gang members' unconventional approach. Fortunately, they remained silent and didn't ask any questions. Thea had already made up a lie, and she wouldn't even try to claim the initial bindings were proper, suggesting they were simply a tampering technique. Since you haven't asked, it's assumed the gang members were responsible. While 4 strong men could easily have carried the father and daughter off to the truck, doing so would have made them look incompetent, especially in front of Leela, a high-ranking member of the organization. They needed to demonstrate some degree of accomplishment. If not now, when? The lead agent gave the 2 behind him a look, and they quickly entered, carrying various tools like chainsaws, hammers, and welders. The 4 sturdy men toiled for a full half hour before finally removing the chains from Gordon and his daughter. Remarkably, the old director regained consciousness during the final 2 minutes of the process. Perhaps his numerous kidnappings by various criminals over his career had given him considerable resistance to poisons, but his age and the inevitable aging of his body had contributed to his prolonged coma. When he opened his eyes and saw several men in black wielding chainsaws and welders, he wasn't surprised at all. He naturally shouted, "If you have anything, come at me. Don't touch my daughter." This left the agents bewildered. Leela, their supervisor, quickly explained, but Gordon, honestly, didn't have a high level of trust in the government. He wondered if they were responsible. A poisonous gas of this strength couldn't be easily obtained by ordinary people, and the Sky Eye Society was the primary suspect. Leela was amused and embarrassed by his suspicious look. She also realized how suspicious she had been of Thea when she first woke up. It was only natural, wasn't it? Suddenly, Leela recalled her own experience and pulled Thea over to recount it to the old director. "Thank you, Miss Thea. Your selfless help really leaves me speechless." Director Gordon had already assessed the situation. The people around him weren't bad guys. The chainsaws and welding looked intimidating, but they were all there to help him break the chains. Even at his age, that was obvious. He had a good impression of Thea. She had no reason to team up with government agents to kidnap him and his daughter. He primarily believed that Thea didn't care about his family's meager wealth. After all, she was the heir to a wealthy family and had given him the opportunity to rise to prominence. She wasn't seeking fame or fortune. Someone had come all this way to help him. His unfounded suspicion was unkind. But his immediate acceptance of reality still had a certain impact on Leela. "Well, I've been speaking earnestly on behalf of the organization, and you don't believe me at all? You just believe what someone else says. Has our organization's credibility become so low? Remember, Gordon isn't just an ordinary person. He's the police chief of a city with a population of tens of millions, a well-known figure in society." Leela was already preparing to go back and suggest to Amanda that they make some improvements. Regardless of the truth, at least they should make a good show of themselves. Otherwise, not only the people, but even the higher-ups don't trust us anymore. What's the point of us going anywhere? Let's just go home and go home. 4 people arrived in 2 cars. Thea, having recovered enough, didn't get in their car. She got on her skateboard and followed them, low to the ground. This was Leela's first time seeing her skateboard. She'd only heard about it before, but now, seeing it in person, she was stunned. Making it wasn't difficult, at least for a government-funded organization like theirs. With the money to spare, it was definitely possible. The real challenge was the design. Could this equipment enter frontline service? Leela pondered, feeling a bit shaky. This thing looked incredibly expensive. A small quantity wouldn't be very useful. Giving it to someone and not giving it to someone would easily lead to conflict. And if they had too many, would their organization have the money? Thea followed the car for half an hour, arriving at a small, deserted villa complex. The stillness gave off a sense of no admission for outsiders. "This is our base in Gotham. Please come in." Leela rested for a while. Thanks to her youth and high resistance to toxins, she had mostly regained her mobility, unlike the initial dreadful crawl she'd had after overeating at the buffet, where she'd been leaning against the wall. Commissioner Gordon wasn't quite there yet, but he didn't need help. He fetched a cane and trudged inside. Medical personnel at the base examined the 2 still conscious sleeping beauties and concluded they were fine and would soon wake up. However, since they didn't know the cause of the unconsciousness, they had no idea how soon this would be. Blood tests were taken from the 3 awakened individuals. No one dared administer drugs before the results were in, so each person was given a glucose vial to stay hydrated. Just as they were about to leave, Thea dug into her backpack, pulled out the 2 gas masks, and handed them to them. "These are the masks the criminals were wearing. I don't know if they're standard, but I think they're custom-made. You should take them for analysis, analyze them," Leela ordered without waiting for a reply. She'd been through so much today that she'd forgotten what she'd originally planned to do on campus. She felt more humiliated than she'd ever been. She wanted to find the mastermind and shoot him twice from the bottom of her gun before anything else. Leela had more work to do, so she left after a while, leaving Thea and Gordon to stare at the 2 sleeping beauties, wondering when they'd wake up. Felicity should have woken up long ago, having inhaled the least of the group. But the doctor said it was all about her constitution, which made Thea a little suspicious. She had no constitution, after all. She never exercised, so who knows how bad her constitution must be. Barbara had been exercising quite a bit, but she couldn't handle the amount of air she inhaled. Thea dragged her through a series of rounds, leaving her with a large swelling on her forehead. The medical staff had looked at it with strange eyes, bewildered, wondering why she'd been beaten so severely after she'd been unconscious. Ultimately, it could only be chalked up to the brutality of the criminals. Just as Thea was idly considering starting a bet to see who would wake up first, Felicity, living up to the hopes of the people of Star City, woke up first. Chapter 75: The Attention of the Sky Eye Society. To say she'd woken up was a bit of an exaggeration. Felicity was still semi-conscious, mumbling things like "Dad, Mom, don't go." Under Commissioner Gordon's urgent gaze, Barbara awoke less than half a minute later, much to the commissioner's relief. Though Barbara woke later, her constitution was far stronger than Felicity's, having undergone rigorous training. The reason she woke later than the nerdy Felicity was mainly due to the excessive volume she'd inhaled, coupled with the fact that someone had been dragging her along, and she was still dizzy. Medical staff quickly administered supplemental injections to the two women to speed their recovery. Preliminary analysis by several pharmacologists determined that while most medications were ineffective, a few antibacterial and anti-inflammatory drugs wouldn't conflict with their use. Especially considering the large bump on Barbara's forehead, if she hadn't received timely treatment, she could have been disfigured. Although still a little weak, Barbara's recovery was remarkable. She could now clearly see her father and speak a few fragmented words. Felicity was in far worse condition, still vacillating between unconsciousness and semi-consciousness. But being revived was a good thing. Thea felt the medical staff were truly resourceful, far superior to her own initial revival methods of pouring cold water and blowing cool breezes. "Dad, where are we?" Barbara gradually regained consciousness and looked around in confusion. This wasn't where she'd been before. Where were we? Commissioner Gordon had no idea where this was either. He'd been brought in dazed. At his age, his recovery wasn't as fast as a younger person's, but to reassure his daughter, he'd made up a lie that wasn't really a lie. "This is a secret location, it's safe. Where's Robin?" Barbara looked around, not seeing her boyfriend. Feeling uneasy, she hurriedly asked her father. "Oh," Commissioner Gordon suddenly realized Robin hadn't been there the whole time. Thea hadn't mentioned it earlier. Had he not been rescued? He turned and gave Thea a questioning look. What could Thea say? She could only shake her head. "Robin's still on campus. We'll go rescue him later." Commissioner Gordon was generally supportive of Robin's relationship with his daughter, but there was a certain resentment in his heart that a father-in-law might have towards his son-in-law. So, he wasn't angry that Thea hadn't rescued Robin. Instead, he felt like he needed to teach her a lesson. It's said that most people forget their fathers when they get a man, and their mothers when they get a wife. When Barbara heard her boyfriend hadn't come out, and she hadn't figured out who had rescued her, she felt a mixture of anxiety and worry, and fainted from the multiple blows. Watching Commissioner Gordon, like he was in a movie, holding his daughter and crying, "Barbara, wake up. Open your eyes." Thea felt a sharp pain in her teeth. She had only fainted, not died. Why was there such an exaggeration? Now that they were both awake, her tonight's work hadn't been in vain. She turned and left the room, looking for the researchers in the lab to see if they had analyzed the composition of the poison. If possible, she still had to rescue Robin. And Catwoman was nowhere to be found, so she had to look for her. Meanwhile, Leela entered a sealed room and gave a long command. The monitor revealed Amanda's dark face. "Well, Leela, you're recovering quickly. Thank you for your concern, Commander." Neither of them was willing to waste time, and they quickly got down to business. "Sir, here are the blood tests for Thea, Chief Gordon, and me. The toxic gas levels in all three of us exceed normal human tolerance. Gordon and I inhaled about the same amount. I'm a bit stronger than Chief Gordon due to my training, but Thea's inhaled far more than either of us," Leela reported in a low voice, holding the report in her hand. "What do you mean? Is she a psychic?" Amanda asked non-committally. "On the contrary. Her blood, cells, hemoglobin, and everything else are normal human levels. Her body endured such a tremendous strain, yet she was still able to fight fiercely and rescue 3 people. This only demonstrates her immense willpower. At least, if it were me, I wouldn't be able to do it." Agents are very pragmatic, knowing their limits. If they can do something, they can do it, and if they can't, they can't. Forcing themselves to complete a mission without the ability to do it will inevitably result in the deaths of a large number of people. Leela admitted that she didn't have such strong willpower. She could barely walk 2 steps at a time, so how could she fight the enemy? "You're kidding." "Oh," Amanda didn't feel anything particularly off-putting, because such people weren't unheard of. Some, through sheer force of will, could truly accomplish incredible feats. They existed in the military and beyond. Batman was a living example, a testament to this. He'd been gassed numerous times, and while it was unsightly, he'd always managed to escape successfully. Comparing Bruce and Thea's pasts, Amanda searched for similarities, and she found quite a few. First, they were both wealthy, at least richer than herself, a soldier on a meager salary. Second, both had suffered tragic family misfortunes, surrounded by wolves. The only difference between their later lives was Star City's relative sunshine, Gotham's gloominess. Do children from wealthy families tend to become superheroes? Amanda had a sudden thought, should she find a few more of these people to test? They weren't greedy for money, weren't afraid of death, and were filled with ideals. That made them seem like a good fit for her organization. Recovering from her thoughts, Amanda asked Layla, "What's your conclusion? Do you think she meets our criteria?" "Yes, I think she does, at least better than Batman." "She could be a partner with the AOM, Layla said affirmatively. "I understand," Amanda said, closing the call. Sitting in a chair, looking at a document in her hand, Thea's mother, Moira, had officially submitted her candidacy to the government for the next mayoral election. Her current polls were significantly ahead of the other candidate. Her policy agenda was simple, restoring jobs and developing new economic growth sources. Amanda had previously dismissed these empty words as trash, but now that Thea, a little butterfly, had gotten involved, she had to take a closer look. If Moira were elected, she would be in the sights of the nation's highest rulers. As a secret government organization, she would naturally align herself with them, and this would also help draw Thea, a superhero, to the government's side. In this respect, Thea was indeed a much more suitable candidate than the mentally unstable Batman, who could go insane at any moment. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.